Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Thursday, January 12th, and I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world. So stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we'll head over to Alan, where he will meet with Shravish Sridhar, founder and CEO of Kintend, to discuss why democratizing access to risk and compliance tools should become an industry standard for startups and SMBs. Alan will then speak to Kelly Albrink, Practice Director of Application Security at Bishop Fox, to discuss New Year's resolutions for security folks. We will then air an episode of Techstrong Women. In this episode, hosts Jody Ashley and Tracy Reagan are joined by Heidi Gilmore with StackState to discuss marketing in the tech industry, how important marketing professionals are taking in technical concepts and making them easy to understand, and dispelling the myth that marketing is fluffy. Next up, we are airing episode 5 of our series, Engineering the Change. This series will follow the 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship Program as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for careers in software engineering. Then we go to AWS reInvent, where Mike Rothman met with Erkeng Zhang, CEO of Jupiter One, to talk about the ever-increasing complexity in companies and how this complexity is making everything an attack surface. Also at AWS reInvent, Alan met with Mike Griever and Miguel Cervantes, co-founders of CloudForce Networks, to discuss the new company which orchestrates fundamental services to fix the skills gap into a no-code SaaS platform. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on and tell us more about some of our upcoming webinars. Then we go to Mitch, where he will meet with Charles Horton, COO of NetSpy, to talk about the acquisition of Invisium to further scale NetSpy's offensive security solutions and address the heightened demand for human-delivered penetration testing. Mitch will then sit down with Chris Darcy, founder of Ecom Pricer, to discuss how the company utilizes AI models and data managing discounts for online sellers. We will then wrap up this broadcast with 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike Vizard interviews Rob Henshaw, Chief Marketing Officer for Cameo, as Rob explains how a shift to Linux servers will lower the cost of implementing virtual desktops as remote work continues to be prevalent. Then Mike interviews Dotan Horowitz, Principal Developer Advocate for Logz.io, as Dotan explains why platform engineering represents the latest effort to centrally manage DevOps platforms at scale without compromising flexibility in a way developers will resist. And that's what we have coming up for you on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for January 12th. First up, the first attempt to launch satellites into orbit from the UK ended in failure. Earlier this week, the American company Virgin Orbit tried their first launch from Cornwall in the southwest of England. The launch, which was carried out in collaboration with the UK Space Agency, the Royal Air Force, Virgin Orbit, and the Cornwall Council, utilized a modified jumbo jet to take the rocket across the Atlantic Ocean. Unfortunately, about 2 hours into the flight, the company reported that the rocket, which was carrying 9 small satellites for civilian and domestic purposes, was unable to reach orbit and was destroyed due to an anomaly. In spite of this setback, the British officials are still committed to becoming a major player in the satellite industry and are working on constructing a new spaceport in the Shetland Islands, in addition to the one in Cornwall. Next, Apple is planning to replace a key part supplied by Broadcom in its devices with one of its own by 2025, as a part of a move to use more in-house components in its devices and decrease its reliance on third-party suppliers. The component in question is a chip that handles both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth functions. Additionally, the company plans to release its own cellular modem chip in late 2024 or early 2025, which will allow it to replace parts from Qualcomm, but it was delayed due to development difficulties. Zooming out, this move could have a significant impact on the chip industry, as both Broadcom and Qualcomm are major suppliers for Apple. In other news, Coinbase has decided to cut 20% of its workforce. This move will impact 950 workers and will also end up suspending several projects. The goal of this decision is to lower expenses and increase the chances of success in any market condition. This is the second time in a year that the company's had to cut its workforce, with the first time back in June of 2022, where it let go 18% of its staff. Overall, the company said it wants to cut its operating expenses by 25% in this quarter. This move is similar to other crypto firms who are currently taking big steps to survive the current market downturn. Next up, the South Korean solar panel manufacturer Qcells announced it will invest over $2.5 billion in building factories in Georgia. The company plans to construct a new factory in northern Georgia and will employ approximately 2,000 people and will make components that are typically manufactured outside of the United States. The factory will assemble solar panels, silicon ingots and wafers, as well as solar cells. Additionally, the company is adding a third phase to its already existing plant, which is the largest maker of solar panels in the Western Hemisphere. This plan aligns with the aim of the Climate Change and Health Care Bill that was signed in August of last year, which provides tax credits for companies making components for solar panels. The construction is expected to start in the next few weeks and will be completed before the end of 2024. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at how a WithSecure report is showcasing the language model threat. The report showed how a machine-generative pre-trained transformer language models like GPT-3 can generate text capable of driving phishing and business email compromises. A new wave of cyber attacks could be coming soon, and organizations are going to need to find new ways of validating documents. To learn more, go to securityboulevard.com. On DevOps.com, we have an article looking at a survey that shows a spike in value stream management adoption. The survey, which was conducted by Broadcom, found that 39% of respondents had said that they had implemented a VSM platform, and 60% said that they would use a VSM to deliver products this year. To learn more, go to DevOps.com. Finally, on Container Journal, we have an article on some cloud-native config management best practices. Managing configurations in a cloud-native application can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be, though. This article looks at 5 best practices to help you navigate your way through a configuration mess. To learn more, go to ContainerJournal.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I've got a first-time company here on Techstrong TV to tell you all about, and their co-founder or CEO. His name is Shravish Sridhar. If I messed that up, I apologize. But Shravish, welcome. Correct me on your name, please, and tell us about your company.
You did a fantastic job. Thank you.
Is that really? I appreciate that, but Shravish, I know I got right.
You did. Shravish Sridhar.
Sridhar. Okay. All right. So we're starting off. Okay, Shravish, we're going to talk about you and your company, and you're going to have a good discussion today. But why don't we talk about you, as I said at first? Why don't you maybe share a little of your background with our audience?
Alan, first off, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here.
It's our pleasure.
I am a 3-time founder. I'm an immigrant entrepreneur that moved here to the US in 1996, went to school at the University of Texas, did my undergrad, and I've done 3 startups over the last 20 years. And
great for you.
All 3 were venture-backed. The first 2 were successful exits, and I'm on to my 3rd one. And we've been building this company called Kintent, which is based in Boston, but our entire team is completely distributed all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we are building a company to completely disrupt a market called governance, risk, and compliance, or GRC, and come up with ways to improve it significantly.
Absolutely. Let me just get some housekeeping out of the way. How do you spell content?
Kintent. Content.
And I'm going to assume the website is content.com or IO or?
The website is content.com.
Excellent. All right. So, Shravesh, look, I've been in security 25 plus years. GRC, frankly, has been a pain in the butt for every one of those 25 plus years, right? It's a problem that used to be, it was a big enterprise problem, right? Because big enterprises had to worry about GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, right? As you went downstream, generally companies had much less GRC issues to deal with, and the more simpler those GRC issues became, the easier it was to kind of give them a one-size-fits-all type of solution because their GRC issues were relatively simpler. Of course, in today's complicated world around compliance and regulations and reporting and so forth, third-party reporting, no one has a simple GRC task, right? It's a bit of a complication for everyone. So I'd love to hear how you guys are going to disrupt this and what makes you think it's doable.
Alan, like I said, this is my third startup. My first two companies were B2B companies selling to large enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of every enterprise sales process, we had to prove that we had a strong security program, a strong privacy program, and a strong compliance program. If we couldn't do that, we couldn't drive revenue. Enterprises would not do business with us. And 20 years of shuffling paper, uploading documents, taking screenshots, and answering security questionnaires, and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on compliance got me frustrated that there isn't a better way to achieve compliance, and more importantly, prove it to not only your internal stakeholders, in other words, your board, but also your customers and regulators.
Sure.
We are still pushing papers in the world of GRC. GRC is still in the 20th century.
Yeah. I used to so just by way of background, I've also started a few venture-backed companies.
Yeah.
And been there, done that. And GRC's always been a component of that because, when you're doing venture-backed companies, you have, a board made up of professionals, and even if you're not a public company, there are compliance and governance, protocols that you must follow. So
That's right.
I've had to do this, and it's hard. I mean, there's no sweet talking it or sugarcoating it. It can be hard. I always used to hear from my VC friends, though, that, hey, if your biggest competitor is a spreadsheet, you're in a good market, right? Because that's a market that needs to be fixed.
That's right.
There are still a lot of companies that spreadsheet their GRC.
I agree with you, and I'll add one more layer to your statement. If your competitor is a spreadsheet and your primary use case is focused around accelerating or driving revenue, and you bring those two aspects together, you're in a phenomenal market.
Yeah.
Because you could take the manual nature of maintaining a spreadsheet and figure out how to automate it, but more importantly, attribute those automations to driving revenue. And now you go from being a cost center to a revenue enabler. And that's a phenomenal business to try to build.
Absolutely. Because I think for the most part, GRC is or has been viewed certainly as a cost center, right? This is just a cost of doing business, COGS. Now, to be fair, there have been others over the last years who have also tried to slay this dragon.
They have.
Why is this time different, I guess, is the question.
There have been two kinds of approaches that have been taken in the last 20 years when it comes to the GRC space. Phase one was taking the spreadsheet and moving it into a web-based platform and primarily focused on the ability to manage the workflows of GRC. And these are companies like Archer. They are the large vendor in the space. Tugboat Logic, which was recently acquired by OneTrust a couple of years ago, and a whole host of others. They essentially took the spreadsheet and gave you a SaaS-based interface to manage workflows. In the last 3 years, there have been startups that have come about that have said we can do better. We can automate the ability for you to collect evidence to achieve compliance. This industry is called compliance automation.
Right.
And if you go to all their websites, they look exactly the same. And their promise is things like put your compliance on autopilot, put your security on autopilot, and things of that nature. And my opinion is, although that is much better than just managing workflows, automating compliance is a very dangerous statement to make because, like you said earlier, governance, risk, and compliance is a board level issue. You don't take something as serious as that and just say, I'm going to automate it. There's got to be governance around it. There's got to be truth around it. And there's got to be accuracy around it. And so the approach we took is different because we're bringing together two ideas which nobody has enabled in this industry, which is one, assurance. Do you actually know that what you're claiming to be doing is 100% accurate? And second, verification. Can I, as an internal auditor, an external auditor, or a customer or board member, verify programmatically that what you're saying is true? And if you can bring assurance and verification together, what you end up doing is you transform GRC into trust. And so I took a long time to get to the punchline. What Kintent is trying to do is to transform the GRC market into a trust assurance platform.
I like that. I like it a lot. And also I like the fact that you're not over-promising on the automation.
No.
Right? Because I think that is where some people have gone off onto the dirt road.
You're right.
By saying, okay, we know this problem's really hard. We're just going to automate it so you don't have to worry about it anymore. And it's not something that is just 100% automatable, whatever the word may be, right? I don't think automatable is a word, but it's not something that you can just automate totally like that. It's, and anyone, I think we've all grown tired of magic bullets, silver bullets, right, that are going to fix things like that. And I think we're looking for real world solutions that, don't overpromise.
Alan, you're absolutely right. I think a disservice that the startups in this space have done to the industry, to your point, has provided unreal claims around automation. And in their mind, what they have said is automation equals integrations. And so they've weaved this amazing marketing narrative that says, I have 80 integrations, I've got 100 integrations, I've got 120 integrations. And they weaved a narrative that the more integrations you have, the more you can automate. But what they are failing to educate the market around is that it's not about the number of integrations. It's about, can you programmatically determine whether a company is satisfying a control or not? And a control is a very personalized and custom concept that is catered towards how a business runs its operations. And so, yes, you can have hundreds of integrations, but what's really important is that there is governance around how controls are designed, and then there is programmatic verification to determine if the control is meeting its objective that has been designed for that business.
Agreed. I don't. I couldn't agree more with you. So let me just, they talk about moving the goalposts and trying to hit a moving target. I think some of the things that I'm interested in your take on this, some of the factors that a company like yours has to take into account is, number one, kind of the changing guidance for governance and risk compliance, right? We have many new statutes and regulations and jurisdictions, right? That's kind of an ever-changing recipe mix. But at the same time, with the modern software factory and how quickly software is developed and deployed and updated and feedback and deploying it on things at the edge of the network and beyond and stuff like that, it's almost harder than ever to get, called a snapshot of what your current GRC, kind of profile is. That's got to make it a harder job, or it would seem to me it's got to make it a harder job.
Yeah, you're right. There are four. The way we look at it at Content is that there are four pillars that are constantly changing that affects a business when it comes to GRC. The first pillar is the regulations that change from time to time, new laws that come up from time to time, as well as your customer requirements that change every year. You may have done a contract with a large bank this year. Next year, they're going to change the way they're going to assess you for risk. So the customer requirements change as well. So the requirements that govern your business are changing every year. So that's pillar number one. Pillar number two is we live in a cloud-native world, and net new projects are being done with cloud infrastructure as well as with SaaS businesses. And the number of vendors that companies are using are changing all the time. And the number of breaches that affect those vendors are changing all the time. So that's issue number two. Issue number three is software itself. There's a modern phrase that is making its way in the industry called software bill of materials. This describes the stack that you're using to build your software. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is based on open source technology. So software is changing on a continuous basis, and keeping track of the risk associated with software is very, very hard. And finally, and probably the most underappreciated part of the governance, risk, and compliance industry is people. We live in a remote world. We live in a hybrid work environment. People live all over the place. We're hiring people from different parts of the world, different cultures, different education backgrounds. How do you make sure that the people are doing the right things that they need to be doing so that they are protecting your business and they're custodians of trust for your business? That's really hard, right? So to sum it up, regulations, vendors, software, and people are constantly changing, and that creates risk in your GRC program. And so our approach is to make it systematic and programmatic, to validate and test your controls across all those four vectors and determine if there is change or deviation from what is expected of you. And as soon as that change and deviation happens, the appropriate people in the organization are notified and action needs to be taken.
Excellent.
Here's the key. And this is the number one issue, in my opinion, with governance, risk, and compliance. Nobody understands why.
Okay,
Our
what do you mean by
approach,
that?
if I go to you, Alan, and say, Alan, you need to attest to a policy, or you need to solve for a control, or you need to fix a breach, a potential breach, but I'm explaining it to you in compliance language, you're going to look at me and say, I don't understand what you're saying because I'm in marketing, or I'm in sales, or I'm in DevOps. But if I come to you and say, I need you to do a specific thing and describe it from the framework of your daily work. So instead of saying, I need you to fix a control, I tell you, I need you to complete attesting to our security policy, or I need you to make sure all our databases are encrypted. You now understand it in the concept of your job. part one. And part two, if I then describe it from the perspective of the business impact that you're creating. So in other words, if I tell you, by satisfying this control, you're helping protect us against liability worth $50 million because we've committed in 100 contracts that we do this. Or you're protecting us from enabling our salespeople to represent to our customers that we do this, right? So you're driving revenue. So if I'm able to explain the business impact of you being a custodian of trust in our enterprises, what we found is people really want to do the right thing.
I don't disagree. I don't think anyone raises their hand and says, I want to do the wrong thing, right? They do want to do the right thing. It's their jobs. It's their professional responsibility. It's just, I think when the task becomes so difficult or obtuse, they have other tasks to do, and they deprioritize that task. Let's, if you don't mind, Shraddha, we're probably over time already, but I wanted to just kind of hit on this. How is content packaged? How do people engage?
It's a great question. Content's product is called Trust Cloud. That's the name of the platform. And the way Trust Cloud works is it onboards a customer into the platform. And as part of the onboarding process, we understand who their people are. This helps us understand people risk. We understand who their vendors are. We get a sense of what their software repositories and their software products look like. And finally, we get a sense of what governance, risk, and compliance frameworks they need to adhere to. That's part of the onboarding process. Once that happens, two things are immediately unleashed. First is we've taken concepts from the world of CI/CD, or continuous integration and continuous development, and enabled programmatic testing of controls. So just like you would constantly test your source code, you would deploy your source code after you test it. Or to use a human analogy, some of us wear an Apple Watch to validate if our blood pressure and the number of steps we're running, et cetera, meets our goals. Similarly, we turn on continuous testing for control verification. So that's part one. Part two is we've built an AI engine that auto-detects and auto-generates policies based on the controls in your program in case you don't have those policies. But it's also used to do things like respond to security questionnaires. So if a customer sends you a security questionnaire, the AI can auto-generate and auto-fill 65% of those security questionnaires because it knows about your security program and your compliance program. The AI can also have a conversation with your prospects. Your prospects can come in and ask a question. For example, the prospect can ask, how do you encrypt my data? And the AI generates an answer and pulls artifacts from your Trust Cloud that supports the answer. So we're taking concepts of CI/CD and APIs and AI and bringing it together in a modern platform to make trust verification completely programmatic for not only yourself, but also your customers.
Excellent. As I mentioned, I think we're way over time, but that's okay. I just want to end it again. Content, KONTENT.com. Is that correct?
Content, KINTENT.
KINTNT.com.
Alan, just like I told you earlier that my name is Ravish with an S in front of it.
It's content with an I.
Is the word intent with a K in front of it.
Excellent. All right. So there's a rhyme and a reason to it as well. So Ravish, thank you so much for coming on Techstrong TV and telling us all about Content, as well as a good discussion of what current state of GRC is. So important stuff. Come back and join us again. Keep us posted on progress there, and best of luck to you.
I'd love to do that, Alan. Thank you for having me.
All right. Content here on Techstrong TV. That's KINTNT, intent with a K.com. Go check it out. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I am really happy to have, well, she's been on Techstrong before, but this is the first time I've had a chance to meet her here on Techstrong. I want to introduce you to Kelly Albrink. Kelly is with Bishop Fox, where she runs the app security programs. And Kelly, welcome to Techstrong TV. How are you? Happy New Year.
Very good. Thanks for having me, Alan.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So, Kelly, before we jump in, we're going to talk about several things, but let's talk a little bit about Kelly. Give people a chance to kind of understand who you are.
Sure. So I head up our application security practice at Bishop Fox. And if you don't know Bishop Fox, we are an offensive security consulting firm. So we do all kinds of pen testing all day. That's our bread and butter. Don't do a whole lot of else, just offensive. And here at Bishop Fox, I do our AppSec practice. So that's our, web apps, mobile apps. It includes some of our threat modeling and architecture security assessments, source code review, and hardware, which is actually where my background is. So doing embedded security. And I love anything wireless or radio related. That's my jam.
I get it. I love it. So I think it's almost easy to say what AppSec isn't in an offensive security company rather than what it is. So what would not be under your kind of domain there?
So we have specialized practices for network security as well. So that's your internal, external networks, as well as a cloud practice. Mm-hmm. And then we have a really cool special practice for red teaming. So adversarial offensive security operations, very cool, anything goes, cutting edge kind of stuff.
Excellent. Love it. All right. And if we haven't mentioned, it's bishopfox.com, BISHOPFOX.com.
Yep.
Also, we should give a shout out to our good friend Kevin Kosh, who I know for more years than he probably wants to admit, is now at Bishop Fox as well. And we wish him well there. So, Kelly, it's a new year. And more than ever, after 25 years in security, more than ever before, I look at this year and say, you know what? This really is the year. Security is number one. Security is, people are going to really get on their horse and ride here. We're gonna make a difference. We're gonna correct a lot of past wrongs and set things straight. It's not gonna be perfect. We're still gonna have breaches. We're still gonna have bad things happen. But God darn it, this is the year we start getting it right. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. But I'm interested in your take. You have some kind of New Year sort of resolutions.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your optimism. Security is hard.
I'm an optimist. I'm a half glass half full kind of guy. But go ahead.
I mean, I think security, it's just one of those things where you always have to be learning. So New Year's resolutions are a great way to kind of give yourself a plan, give yourself some goals for how you're going to grow this year and make sure that your skills don't get stale and kind of fall behind. So lots of different approaches to resolutions. And I mean, I think we all are trying to do things like be healthier and get outside more. But when we're talking about our career and our technical skills, our soft skills, there's lots of different resolutions that we can put into practice. And I always give people kind of the advice of, look at it from where you are in your career. So somebody who's kind of just trying to break into the industry is going to have a very different resolution and goal from somebody that's maybe mid-career or later career or trying to get into leadership. There's lots of cool things that you can kind of learn and grow into in 2023.
Absolutely. So let's jump into some specifics if you don't mind.
Yeah. I would say for me, some of the hot topics that we see people talk about, like cloud security is huge. If you're not already getting into cloud security, you're kind of behind, right? I think most apps have moved into cloud environments. So if you're already familiar with the cloud, then maybe exposing yourself to a new platform. So if you're really comfy with AWS, maybe it's time to get into Azure or Google Cloud. If you're feeling good about the platforms themselves, then maybe it's driving a little bit deeper into specific elements or technologies. So serverless functions or orchestration in Kubernetes, right? I think there's a lot of really cool things that synergize with the skills we already have. If you're involved in application security, you should already be pretty familiar with cloud. If you're involved in IoT and embedded security, the client tie into cloud there is amazing. So I always say whatever skills you currently have, your goal should kind of synergize and build on what you already know.
So I'd tell you my take on that one. It's funny. We have this Predict virtual event on January 12th. It's coming up. And in the there's 4 tracks: cyber, DevOps, digital transformation, and cloud native. In the digital transformation track, we talk a lot about cloud and cloud security. And, I think we've reached not that the cloud is totally mature, but there's definitely been a maturation of cloud, right? Where, as you said, if you're not already dealing with cloud security, I got to ask, are you in some kind of specialized vertical that is shunned the cloud or something? Because it's everywhere. And when we look at the big 3 public cloud providers, right? AWS, Microsoft, Google, while they each do certain things specialized, there's a tremendous amount of equality, if you will, between them. And there was a time where you could just say, look, AWS is the 800-pound gorilla. That's all I care about. That's what I'm going to be a specialist on. I don't know from a cloud security perspective if that's still, if you want to limit yourself that way and just say, I'm only AWS.
Well, we're seeing organizations using multiple platforms now, right? And nobody's putting all of their eggs in one basket, and that's not a smart thing to do. So really, you've got to get cross-functional across these different cloud platforms.
I agree. And I'll tell you something. For as much as we talk about cloud, and when we talk about cloud, we tend to think of the big 3 public clouds. There's still so much infrastructure in private clouds, whether it be on the Oracle or IBM platforms or on private data center private cloud, right? And hybrid and all of that. So, I mean, there's a lot of skills there from a security point of view that you need to, master if you're going to call yourself a cloud security person.
Right. I mean, even if you're working with organizations that are mostly on-prem, some of those holdouts may be considering moving to the cloud, right? We might have reached critical mass. And so it's time to just be familiar and know what the pros and cons of these different approaches are going to be. But cloud is probably something we could have said last year too, right? I think that's not new. That's not bleeding edge. One area in application security that my team and my consultants are really interested in is blockchain security. So smart contract security. These are vulnerabilities that have huge multi-million-dollar implications. And so I think that's really exciting and challenging for people. So that's an area I'm seeing a lot of people want to learn more about and specialize in.
I don't disagree. So I got to tell you, I'm not a big crypto person, right? I never jumped on that wagon. I felt in so many ways that whole crypto thing held back blockchain from being used to because there are some real advantages from a security point of view that blockchain bring to us, right? That if we implemented blockchain on things, we'd be better off in certain things. But because of the crypto connotation and connection, I think a lot of people were like, I'm going to stay away from that one.
Yeah. I think
go ahead.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people, when they hear blockchain, they immediately think cryptocurrency. But it's really the blockchain technology that's really interesting. And I think we're just seeing the beginning of interesting implementations with smart contracts.
So do you think this is a big year for it, or it's still 2-3 years out?
I mean, it is the Wild West there right now, right? I think we're all still reeling from all kinds of crypto scams, from NFTs and how that has played out. So kind of getting away from that, like, con man kind of association with crypto, I think is going to be the big challenge for using that technology and making it more widely accepted.
Absolutely. I agree. All right. So blockchain definitely up there.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Let's see. Well, I think IoT embedded security is huge. Year over year, we're seeing like just massive growth in that space. And so that for me is kind of my expertise in area. So I'm always encouraging people to look more at the physical security of their devices. And I think that ties a lot into what we were talking about with the cloud before. But for me, any kind of wireless technology is really interesting. We're seeing a ton of devices with NFC technology starting to be embedded in it. And that has become hugely more accessible for security researchers with tools like the Flipper Zero that came out last year. And I don't know if you've seen one of those yet, but it's a very affordable kind of entry-level radio hacking solution that has RFID, NFC, sub-gigahertz, infrared. It's a really cool tool that you can use to start to analyze some of the devices in your own home or your office. And it allows people to really learn about security that, you know, maybe it's not directly connected to the internet. Maybe it's something you need to be in close physical proximity to. And that hasn't been a part of many people's threat models before. So it's kind of adding a new element to your security posture when you start thinking about, well, what can my neighbors see about my home and my devices over the radio?
Yeah. It's scary, right? Because I being a security person, right, I regularly will look like what Wi-Fi networks, what SSIDs are coming bleeding into my house, right? And even just in my, you know, my neighborhood, which is really, I live, you know, it's not that big a neighborhood, and it's crazy what you see, and you know, when people, I mean, naming conventions that are so. Like, when you're looking for trouble, you know, and you know that most of them have ridiculous passwords as well. But it is true. I'll tell you, you know, whether it's the, I'll give you a great, for instance, I set up a new turntable this weekend. Because I'm back into vinyl. So I bought a, you know, it's a regular turntable that connects RCA plugs in and out, but it also broadcasts Bluetooth.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my TV starts picking it up.
Oh, wow.
And it says, do you want this device? And I didn't know. It just said, do you want this device to connect? And I didn't realize it was from the turntable. I said, yeah, let's see what it is. And all of a sudden, my turntable starts playing through the TV. And I'm thinking to myself, if anyone's walking around my house and they've got some sort of Bluetooth receiver, all they had it, because it was wide open. It was just waiting for someone to hit yes. It didn't ask me on the turntable. It just, by default, was broadcasting.
Yeah, anytime you replace something in your home, there's new tech that's put in it. So, you know, washer dryers, refrigerators.
Yeah, no, all of it. That's what I'm saying. And they didn't make it easy, because I was like, I don't want to use Bluetooth on my turntable right now. I want it to stop broadcasting. I don't want strangers being able to. And they didn't make it easy to shut that off. Like, I kept holding the button thinking that would turn it off. It wasn't. There was another setting. So that is something for people to look at.
Yeah, I mean, the best resolutions are ones that are important to you, right? So I have a very young daughter. We have all kinds of new tech and tools that we use to help raise her. And a lot of it has security implications. So, you know, that's something that's really important to me and has been kind of an exciting area of research. But, you know, it's going to be different for every person. So when you're thinking about resolutions, tailoring it to things that are important to you, I think are going to be a key to being successful.
Let me bring up another area and get your thoughts on it.
Sure.
AIML.
I knew you were going to ask that. We could play like
this.
buzzword bingo for resolution.
You know what? I used to think it was just buzzwords.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, though, and maybe it's because I'm in the media world here, and we're hearing so much about this AI writing articles, writing code.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all my security friends have been buzzing about it. It's going to have an effect.
Yeah. I mean, Chat GPT is something we've been playing with a lot at work, you know, saying, write me a nuclei template to find this particular vulnerability. And we found it's not putting any of us out of a job yet, right?
No, I don't think it's going to. Yeah, let's not get penny henny, sky falling.
Yeah.
That's the flip side of this. That's what we always hear when these new tech. That's it. All of you are going to be out of work. All the security people, done. All the testing people, no more testing in DevOps, right? That never happens. But nevertheless, it's going to have an effect.
Absolutely. And I think for people in tech and security, it's, it's a great like launching off point if you need a project where you're just in the brainstorming phase, like put something into an AI, see what it comes up with. And it's probably not going to be super accurate. It's like pooling the wisdom of the masses, right? It's not always going to give you the right answer, but it might get you pointed in the right direction or give you some new ideas of a totally different direction to take. So worth keeping an eye on, but for me, early days still in kind of the AI and security integration.
I agree. All right, what else do you have on your list?
I don't know. I think for me personally, and where I'm at in my career, you know, I'm in a leadership position. I'm not as hands-on keyboard anymore. So I try to keep a resolution that's going to keep me technical and excited about kind of staying hands-on keyboard, keeping my technical skills sharp. But I also want to have a different resolution that's going to kind of push me ahead on the leadership side of my career. So for me, that is going to be, getting more involved with other business units. So if I'm really used to being, super technical, sitting on the consulting side of the house, maybe it's time to get a little bit more familiar with our sales organization or project management and just kind of building some more of those human relationships that maybe get lost a little bit during COVID.
Absolutely. Let me add to that, if you don't mind, Kelly. You know, for a lot of our listeners, watchers, audience out here, they haven't been in a down cycle of the economy, right? Tech was relatively left out of the terrible recession of 08, 09. It's probably .com bust was the last time we really saw tech. And I fervently pray and hope that this is not a bad year for our economy. But for those of you who have not been through a down cycle, you can't count on the headhunter or the executive search person getting you your next job. You can't count. You need to make human relationships with your peers and your community. There was a time where people would go to conferences like an RSA or a Black Hat or what have you, not just for the learning, but for the networking, for the chance to build your network, just understand what your peers are doing, who your people are, how do you fit in here? How do you build your career from your network? And I'm not talking about your network security network. I mean your human network. And whether it was local meetup groups or ISSA meetings or InfraGard or, whatever it was how you met your community and how you interacted. And believe it or not, that's how people used to get jobs.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of those communities are coming back, right?
I hope
We're
so.
seeing, DEF CON groups start restarting after being gone for a very long time. We're seeing 2,600 groups. We're seeing completely new groups.
I think there will be new ones, and people should embrace it.
Yeah.
Embrace it.
I definitely think, especially for a lot of us who moved during COVID, right? We had the great tech diaspora of people with remote work. A lot of us are in new physical locations and maybe haven't had chance to kind of get connected with the community. So I think that's a great thing to focus on for this.
Absolutely. I was in San Francisco. I think I mentioned to you before we started recording, I was in San Francisco last week, and it was amazing to me how empty the streets were.
Yeah.
But those people are still working somewhere. I don't care whether you're in Montana or...
I used to be in San Francisco, and I moved back east during COVID. Yeah. So it's very different when I go back.
It is. San Francisco's a different town. I think it's going to be a problem for many cities as we face, well, who wants to live in the urban centers? But that's a whole nother interview we could do, Kelly.
Definitely.
But the bottom line is, though, is that no matter where you moved, seek out your peers locally, and because there's strength in numbers, and that's how you really grow. And you'd be surprised who you find there, right? You never know who you're going to run into. And when I say that, I don't mean just your cybersecurity folks. Find out what tech folk are in your community, right? It may be the sales guy for a cyber vendor, but he's a sales guy, and normally you'd say, I don't talk to the sales guy. But you know what? You're in new surroundings. Count your friends. Build your network.
Yeah, and it's a long-term thing, too.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I have someone kind of come out of the woodwork saying, but we met 2 or 3 years ago at an event. And
wait till you get my age. Yeah, I met you 10 years ago. 10 years ago. I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. But anyway.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, that is... Look, so to me, building your network, your human network, is it's got to be a big part of your function. And it's hard too, Kelly, because look, in your case, you have a young family, you're a full-time mom, full-time worker, full-time. How many full-times can you be?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
But you need to make time to build that network. It's important. Anyway, hey, we're about out of time, speaking of time. I want to thank you for coming on. You know what? Let's make a resolution 2023. We get Bishop Fox on here more regularly. Keep us posted about what's happening. All righty?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan.
All right. Bishop Fox, Kelly Albrink here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Techstrong Women, where we feature amazing women doing amazing things in tech. I'm Jody Ashley, executive producer here at Techstrong, and I'm here with my co-host, Tracy Reagan, CEO of Deploy Hub and member of a bunch of boards at the Linux Foundation. She's a busy lady. We're happy to have her here. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to give you a quick update about what's happening here at Techstrong TV. Believe it or not, we're talking about 2023, so be sure to mark your calendar for our annual Predict virtual event on January 12th. Speaker submissions are still open to share your predictions for the upcoming virtual event. Industry leaders and visionaries will speculate about what the future looks like and lay out a roadmap to success. You can register for all of our events by going to techstrongevents.com, and be sure to tune in to techstrong.tv every day for great shows and interviews. Hey, Tracy, what's in your brain today for today's episode?
Well, thanks for reminding me about Predict. I have to get my submission in. That's always a fun show to do. I love doing it because I have to think about what is 2023 going to look like.
Beverly's going to hound you if you don't get that.
I know. I will. I've got to think about, I really have to I like to really think it through and really think, where are we going to be in 12 months from now, basically.
I know.
But we had KubeCon just last week. I did not go. It's kind of big for us. We get lost in the masses at KubeCon. But they did have some interesting announcements. And one that is sort of near and dear to my heart is the Continuous Delivery Foundation, the CDF, announced a new open source project. Yay! I'm so happy for them to have a new open source project. This one is called Persia. It is sponsored initially by JFrog. It was a dream of Stephen Chen. And those of you who know Stephen Chen know he's a brilliant technologist, especially around package management and builds and scanning code and looking for nefarious objects that might get stuck into your build. So what Persia is, it's often called a decentralized package network. And that doesn't necessarily, if we're going to talk about marketing today, and terms always matter. When I first learned about Persia, to me, it is a consensus build network. So, for example, when you run your build, and I'm talking about getting down to the nitty gritty, compiling and linking objects together, you generally do it in one spot. And it's real easy for someone to stick some files in the directory where you're doing the build, and the build's just going to consume them, especially if we use star.star, for example. Well, what Persia is going to do is going to say you're going to build it across multiple locations. So, and you're not, those locations aren't predefined. And everything has to come back and look exactly alike in order for you to know if your build was clean and secure. So Persia is a really interesting step forward in terms of securing the gory details of DevOps, which is the build. And like I always say, the build sometimes when we talk about the gory details of the build, anytime you have something that you could say it's got gory details, it means it's easy to sneak things in because it is always in the details. And oftentimes we don't have time to look at them. So Persia, it's spelled Pyrsia. Go to the cd.foundation and check out Persia, their new open source project. And if this is an area that you're interested in, I would definitely sign up and start becoming a contributor. I believe Oracle is also contributing to it, and Deploy Hub has as well. Builds have always been our favorite thing. So when we saw it coming along, we got involved in it. So that is my news for today, and I'm super excited about it. And I hope everybody.
I'm tacking on to your news because we just launched a new program for the CD Foundation on Techstrong, and it airs once a month. It's hosted by Alan Schimmel and Lori, and I can't remember her last name, also from JFrog. Lori LaRusso from JFrog. And we just launched it. We've got a couple episodes under our belt. So go to techstrong.tv and check those episodes out. I bet we'll be talking about this in the next month or two as an episode. Thanks, Trace. All right, so I'm going to introduce our guest today. She's one of my favorite humans. I've had the actual privilege of working for her when she was over here at Techstrong Group with us. I want to introduce Heidi Gilmore. Heidi, tell us about yourself and what you're up to.
Hey, Jody. Hi, Tracy. So I'm thrilled to be here. And I have to say, I enjoyed working with you too. I did not consider you as working for me. I considered us as working together.
That's why I love
you. But I spent 10 years at CloudBees, really in the early days of CI/CD, then did my stint at Techstrong, which I loved. And now I'm at a company called StackState, and we're in the observability space, another hot space, and kind of ancillary to CI/CD. It really is. It's adjacent. So that was kind of cool because a lot of what I gained from my time at CloudBees transferred over to observability. We do things a little differently with observability. We're topology-powered observability, a real mouthful. But basically, we auto-discover the IT environment and create a visualization of everything out there. And one of the things that really makes us unique is we are able to track every change made in that environment over time. So when an issue occurs, you can actually time travel back to right before that issue and see the change that impacted your environment. So it helps with fast RCA, reducing MTTR, and so forth. So I've been here almost a year, about 10 months.
Well, Heidi, I know when we talked about bringing you on and reached out to you, initially you were a little bit hesitant. And I really want to talk about that. You were hesitant saying, well, I'm a marketing person, and a lot of people don't see marketing as being technical. Now, as somebody who runs a small company and I have to wear a lot of hats, I can tell everybody right now that is a myth. Marketing is extremely technical, and it's super hard because you have to take technical concepts and make them easy to understand.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that initial hesitation?
Sure. You are spot on, Tracy. And I do think in our industry, because it is so technical, and the people we're trying to appeal to are developers, SREs, team leads, CI/CD, really techie roles. And their typical view of marketing is that we're fluffy, that we're B2C fluffy, inflated messages. And I just want to say that anybody in marketing in this industry that's been around the block for more than 2 years does not market in a fluffy way. And if they do, they won't last. We know we're trying to appeal to techie people, and we know that we have to put out thought leadership and education and assets that will help inform and, provide the knowledge that our audience wants. So yes, I have placed many more technical people from the companies that I've worked with on podcasts like this or other podcasts. And usually marketing is not a focus of the guests that those shows want. But I want to say, again, there are lots of talented technical marketing people out here.
And, women sometimes, they're hesitant to move into a marketing role if they're already technical. They may be getting recruited or pinged for it, and they may feel like that's not the best avenue for them. But I don't believe that is always the case, because what I have experienced is that women are amazing communicators, and we have particular skills. We really do, in terms of being able to communicate subjects in a really easy way. So I wanted to say, if there's a woman out there listening to this and you've been a programmer and you've started having fun with, building somebody's website, and you're realizing that you're good at communicating, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate to go into this field, because it still is technical. I mean, Heidi, could you communicate or do the work you do without having an understanding of observability, for example, or even your days at CloudBees around CI/CD? Could you have done it?
Not at all. Like, you really do need to know what you're talking about. And I remember starting at CloudBees back in 2011. We were 13 people at the time. And we went to Java 1 in San Francisco about 2 months after I had joined. I was still learning what CI/CD was all about. But because we were a small company, half of the people that were there, actually all of the people that were at Java 1, were in a board meeting at the same time the expo floor was open. So I was the only person in the booth. You can imagine 2 months into this, having to talk to techie people. But I had already learned enough to know what I knew and what I didn't know. And the most credible thing you can do is, if somebody asks a question and you don't know the answer, to say you don't know the answer, and you'll find out and you'll get back to them and then do it. So it was terrifying initially, but I actually relaxed and just enjoyed the time. And I learned more from the questions that were being asked as well.
I want to really emphasize what you just said. It's so important, and it's important for every role in IT. If you don't know the answer, just say you don't know and go find it. Mm-hmm. I can't even tell you how many, even at the level that I'm at right now, I'll be on board meetings at the OpenSSF or at CD Foundation, and I'll be like, wait a minute, I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Let's just back up for a minute. So sorry if I have to do this to everybody, but I need to understand it in my brain and I'm missing it.
Yeah,
because
totally.
This is a broad, vast field. You can't know everything. And I think sometimes we feel like we should have all the answers, and it's just not possible.
Right. I have to do that too all the time because I produce like 8, 9 different things, and they're all different specialties: SRE, observability, mainframe. And I'll just sit there and I'm like, okay, hand raised, explain what you just said, because it helps me to do better. I can't be an expert at everything. I'm not in one specific area, but yeah. And I'm just going to say it. I think women are more likely to raise that hand. We're more likely to stop and say, okay, I don't understand. And then we also take a beating for it.
Sometimes, but oftentimes not.
It depends on the room. It depends on the room.
It's credibility building. It really is.
It is.
Because the other person will respect the fact that you didn't try to give them a BS answer, but that you were willing to go find the answer. Yeah. And then you know what? We learn the next time that question comes up, we'll know the answer.
So there's nothing more annoying than going down a rabbit hole someone sends you down because they didn't know the answer and they just made something up. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go look at that. And they're like, this has nothing to do with that at all. Then you're never going to go back to that person and ask them a question again. It's super frustrating.
The other thing I've loved seeing over the years is, again, 10, 11, 12 years ago now, there were very few women in IT. There still aren't enough today. But in that period of time, I've seen women like Tracy become CEOs of their companies. There are people like Tracy Miranda, incredibly bright woman who helped form the Continuous Delivery Foundation, which, by the way, I was involved in too, behind the scenes from a marketing standpoint. I wasn't one of the techies moving it forward, but I sure was on the marketing side. But there are so many bright women out there today in real leadership roles, and I love seeing that. In fact, Tracy, you may recall the first time we really had a conversation. We had, I think, met very briefly once or twice before, but it was at the founding of the CDF at Half Moon Bay. You and I just happened to sit down next to each other at lunch and started talking. And we had the most amazing conversation about technology, about venture capital, about startups. Like, we just covered a lot of ground in that conversation. And I walked away thinking, wow, she does women proud. So
thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Women reaching those levels now versus 10, 11, 12 years ago.
Well, I think we have younger women starting to become programmers, and that is the entry level for our field. And I hope that they keep reaching. We have a lot of work to do to still break that glass ceiling. In technology, we have a lot of work. There are some really amazing women that are coming up through the ranks, but I still don't see them being funded like they should be. That still is very sad to me that we don't get in those higher positions through funding. We have to kind of wait our turn, so to speak. And that still holds us back.
Yeah, we've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go.
And maybe we need to do a better job of marketing technology to women.
I think you do. I agree
I went, this has been several years ago. I believe it was Angie Jones who did this presentation, and she did a presentation on how the 80s changed the culture around who was interested in computer science. My mother, for example, she was a file clerk that got elevated to supervisor of a file clerk at a hospital. When IBM came in to figure out how they wanted to build the system, they basically put her in charge of being an analyst, and she got really into computers. But it was women, you could go to look at Vogue magazines and you'll see pictures of women sitting by big computers, and they're advertising shoes. But then in the 80s, we had Weird Science, we had the TRS 80s, and it was pointed out by this amazing talk that they didn't market those to little girls because dads wouldn't spend, $500 or $600 like back then on a PC for a little girl, but they would for a little boy.
Yeah.
And this is how the industry started shifting and focusing and marketing technology to little boys and not little girls. So it was a very interesting thesis, and I have thought about it ever since I saw it because there's so much truth to it. And we still today don't do a good job of marketing technology to women.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's been great to see some of the grassroots organizations spring up to do just that and to really support and encourage women. Like down in Boca Code absolutely is very supportive of women coming into the industry. And there's Girls Who Code, there's all kinds of organizations now to try to be that support mechanism and that encouraging foundation for women to go into technology. But again,
and there's commercials right now with women, with little girls. Amazon has a commercial with a beautiful little girl, and she's coding and she's talking to her friend. And it's all about this little girl who's writing this awesome software. I think it was maybe it was VMware that had a woman talking about what VMware was doing and how it was changing the world. But it was women that was in that role. So the more we have women in those roles, even on a commercial, it's just enough. It's a cultural shift, and I'm finally starting to see it.
Yeah, and that is awesome. But it also can't be tokenism. It can't be putting a woman front and center just to look like you're supportive of females. It's great to see companies actually walk the walk and talk the talk.
Well, and it goes all the way down. I have inherited a couple grandchildren when I got remarried, and watching them 14 and 13 in a week, and watching them in school and just not seeing their teachers encouraging the little girls the way they encourage the little boys. It's still happening because my granddaughter wants to learn to code. She thinks it's cool. And so her grandpa helps her and does it with both the kids, and they both think it's a lot of fun. But we need teachers who are encouraging our little ones so that they're interested in STEM and they're interested in science and they're interested in all that stuff. It goes all the way down to the very beginning, and we're just still not seeing it get pushed up from the bottom. And that's what frustrates me is as I see it in our middle schools and high schools. It's just,
that's disappointing to hear that teachers today, in some cases, aren't being more supportive of girls pursuing STEM.
Then we've got this whole, environment going on where we want to make everything equal. So we don't want to push one more than the other. And it's like, but we need to, it's not equal. We need to push our girls. It's okay to do that. We're not leaving the boys out. We're trying to bring them up and make it a level playing field. But there's so much.
I always say discrimination got us into this mess. It's discrimination that will get us out. It's just the way it has to be.
Yeah, we've got to switch. Yeah, we've got to switch the scale to the other side.
So I have another question for you, Heidi. This is one of my pet peeves about marketing, and I know I'm guilty of it. And that is chasing the shiny new object and then trying to pivot your marketing message around the shiny new object. Mm-hmm. Talk to us, like we were discussing earlier, what's CD? Continuous delivery, continuous deployment. People with release automation tools said it was continuous deployment. And, a lot of people thought Jenkins was doing deployments because it was a CD tool. You can just talk to us a little bit about the silliness of marketing and how you kind of weed through that and how you, as a marketing professional, keep your message clean.
Yeah, and I think that is so important. Another related example to the ones you just gave was DevOps. Remember when that term first started being used? And all of a sudden you saw advertising all over the place. Hey, get our DevOps tools. It was almost like some vendors were promoting, hey, if you buy our tools, you can flip a light switch and tomorrow you're all of a sudden doing DevOps. And those of us in marketing that really understood the industry knew that you don't just do DevOps. DevOps is a very long-term goal initiative, and you're never there. You're always finding new ways as you uncover and solve bottlenecks and automate processes. You're always finding new ways and new processes to automate and to bring into the DevOps process. So I think that's so important to just stay away from the hype and be real about what you do and what you offer. Now, the downside is in that era of DevOps hype, if you didn't market yourself as do DevOps with our tools, you could be perceived as being maybe not a DevOps tool. But I think the developers that really understood what they were trying to do and what they were trying to get into also understood you can't just do DevOps. So there is a lot of chasing the shiny new object, chasing the buzzwords of the day. But I think at the end of the day, that is only a temporary bump, because sooner or later, people figure out what the reality is. And if you're not talking about the reality, you will be discounted and really lose a lot of credibility.
I think a lot of that gets driven by the need to be found in Google. What are people looking at? What is the new? So then you have to figure out how to sprinkle your website with the new shiny object. Right now it's supply chain. Everything is supply chain. DevOps now is becoming supply chain. I mean, I hear people even calling them supply chain pipelines. And, tools that are managing the CD pipe or auditing the CD pipeline itself are being called supply chain. When I think about supply chain, I think about raw materials going into my binary, right? Mm-hmm. That's how I think about it. So if it's got the word chain in it, we can say, oh, it's workflow, right? Because it's a supply chain now. So it gets completely, it seems like madness to me. As a small company to try to chase that ball, it does seem like madness. But there's a part of us that we have to do it in order to get found in Google, on a Google search.
Right. But you try to do it in a credible way. And by the way, I think value stream management is another one of those terms that took on a life of its own and today can be interpreted in a number of ways. But when it comes to DevOps, so for example, we absolutely selling for CloudBees, selling and marketing for CloudBees, we were used by DevOps teams, our software. And so we actually had a page on the CloudBees website. It might still be there today, I'm not sure, called What is DevOps? And we had a lot of thought leadership and informative, educational articles about the culture of DevOps. It was not tools. CI and CD are about tools. DevOps was about the culture of bringing development and operations together, shared goals with the goal of releasing software, not finger pointing, and just making sure everybody was aligned around the same goals. That message got really lost for a long time in the hype around DevOps. So we tried to keep it real by having a voice in those conversations and also continuing to talk about CI and CD, which people also needed to understand. To your point, Tracy, is CD continuous delivery or continuous deployment? There's a difference, a big difference between the two.
So tidbit number 2 that you gave us today, and that is education is important as part of your messaging and your marketing. I have had many people I have spoke to, even at, I was out at API World last week and in San Jose. And I always ask people, what do you think about the sessions? Are you getting the education that you want? And many of them said that one of their biggest complaints is that the sessions are too marketing focused. They want to be educated. And then if they can be told about a tool at the end, they're fine about that. But I want first to be educated. Tell me why I have a problem. Tell me what the problem is. Maybe I have a problem I haven't figured out yet. And you talking, about the page from DevOps, just to give some thought leadership, is a good example of how education is important as part of our marketing strategy.
Totally. You are dead in the water if you're not educating and offering something of value. Because just like the comments you heard, people discount marketing fluff. If they go into a session and it's all about a vendor's tool or a vendor's opinion on something, they're going to tune right out, and they probably will never attend another session that vendor puts on. So it is so important to really provide education as you're trying to convey what your product does in support of that learning.
Well, and it seems like everything is changing so quickly. Like you said, continuous delivery, continuous deployment. It's a constant process. What it might mean today, I'll just learn about something, and then 6 months later, someone will be like, and I'll be like, wait, but I thought, and they're like, yeah, but now we're kind of using it in here too, and there too. And I'm like, okay, so now there's a shift. I think people sometimes just get set on one way of explaining it. And it seems like, to me, from my job, it's so evolutionary. Like every time you turn around, it's changing how you're using this tool with some other process, some other thing to make it work. So it's got to evolve. And sometimes I get confused because it doesn't evolve.
And Jody, you're not the only one. We all do. I mean, literally, CI, the term CD to this day is not clear to many people what it actually means.
Right.
To this day, and we've been doing it for a very, very long time.
We had a whole Slack conversation here about it 2 weeks ago. Like everyone was like,
I'm sure.
And it was like, well, is it deployment? Is it what is it? And there was this everybody weighed in. It was pretty funny. I don't think I got an answer.
On the supply chain management topic, I wrote a blog when that supply chain term came up that said SCM is the new SCM. Because we used to have something called software configuration management, which is SCM. And now we have supply chain management, which is SCM. And they're both doing this. In this case, they're pretty much exactly the same.
Keep repurposing acronyms. That's not helpful either.
I love that, Tracy.
Yeah.
It's true. It's totally true. It's like, oh boy, we got an SCM, but it means the same as SCM, but it's different words to describe it. How useful is that?
New, right?
Yes. So Heidi, walk us through a process. Let's say Deploy Hub contracted you to help with messaging. What is the process you go through?
Messaging. So people kind of minimize the importance of messaging. To do messaging right really requires a lot of time, buy-in from senior management, and precision when it comes to words, because you can't take like a page to describe who you are and what you do. Mm-hmm. So there's a real process behind it. We did this several times at CloudBees, where we did a rebranding, which involved changing our messaging too. To the points we've been making, as the industry evolves, your messaging has to occasionally evolve with it. Now, if your messaging is evolving every 6 months, something's wrong. But every couple years, you have to kind of look at it with a fresh eye and say, okay, is this still current? So you cannot underemphasize the importance of solid messaging. And messaging should be clear. It shouldn't be word salad. It's probably a bit of a stretch in our techie industry to say your grandmother should be able to understand it. But there's something to be said for keeping it simple so that even our brilliant techies can read an about statement and understand what you do. So that is the first step in marketing, is to have solid messaging that you're bought in on, and actually to pressure test it too with some trusted customers or prospects, even people that you lost sales from, to go back and just say, hey, can I have 20 minutes of your time? What do you think about this? And have a discussion with them, because messaging also can't be so inward focused that it conveys what you want to convey. It's got to convey to your audience what you need them to hear, if that makes sense. And then once that messaging is solid, that will ripple out to everything. You should see it reflected in website pages, in collateral, in positioning at trade shows, in trade show booths and other assets. Messaging is really the cornerstone for everything that you do.
Very interesting. I think that we oftentimes, especially when you're a startup, messaging is something that you forget about because you're so having fun coding. And then when you do start messaging, you message at such a granular level that it's hard to bring it up to that higher order.
Yes.
I know for Deploy Hub, I've struggled to just try to describe what it is. And finally, I figured the 2 words described it's an evidence store. I was like, that helps. That helps a lot. We're storing all the supply chain evidence in one place. It's an evidence store. But it took me a while to just kind of keep filtering it and say, if somebody, said, what is it in 3 words? I can do it in 2 now. But it's hard. Great. It's hard. It's very hard.
Very hard. And that's why it takes so much time too, because you bring together, it should be a small, focused team with the power to make decisions, but everybody comes to that conversation with their sacred cows. And so you'll start out with the first draft of messaging. You try to write a sentence and the sentence is like a paragraph long because everybody wants their little bit in there. But the biggest mistake I think many companies make is that deep dive in. We are tech companies. We are in a tech industry, and it's so easy to dive in. But we may understand that, we meaning the people working for the company. But when you look outside of your company, does it make sense to people that have no idea what you do? And that's the real litmus test. It's got to be intuitive for people to understand quickly and not have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what you're saying.
So I'm hearing 2 interesting takes on this because Heidi, you've been with pretty big companies other than Techstrong, obviously, over the last decade plus. And Tracy, you're like an island in your small company. So, it's like one of you has a lot of resources because they have a team and maybe over-resourced because everybody has an opinion. And then Tracy's on the opposite end of the spectrum where it's like, it's me and a couple other people, and I'm trying to do all this myself. So it's interesting to listen to how both of your take on it, because it's very different, right? And Tracy's like, words, I need words. How do I describe it? And then Heidi's got 5,000 words and she's trying to whittle it down into 3 sentences.
Yeah, those sacred cows. When you have a lot of sacred cows, it's really hard to figure out which ones you want to sacrifice.
Yes, it is. But Tracy's smart because she has taken that shortcut to just a couple words, like she got there instead of going through the hours and hours of discussion around sacred cows.
Yeah, but I think her brain went through hours and hours.
It did. I would say months.
months and years. It's interesting. There's a big dichotomy between being small and being bigger company-wise and what you have to deal with. But in the end, you're trying to come up with the same thing, right?
And I will say at CloudBees, we were really fortunate to work with a fantastic external consultant who really helped us through that process. So that was a big learning, I think, for a lot of our execs. And it also gave a little bit of objectivity because this outside person coming in didn't have any of those sacred cows. They could really help us to see how we would be viewed externally. So that was an interesting process. And Jody, we did the same thing at Techstrong when Techstrong rebranded from Media Ops to Techstrong. Right. So that was also a fun time to be there and to be involved in that project.
So I have one last thing before we run out of too much time. You know what, Heidi, people who have worked for you, let me start it this way. I have worked for women who have been terrible. I have to say that.
Tracy and I have had this conversation.
I have worked for women who have been terrible at managing other women. It's sad, and I think it's something that we just have to work on as females, because maybe we haven't had those roles, so we don't have a lot of mentors. But from my understanding, everybody, male or female, loves working for you. What is your secret sauce?
Well, you're way too kind there, but if there is a secret sauce, I think it's that I really respect what everybody brings to the table. And I have been very fortunate to have really talented people on my teams. Some of them have more knowledge than others, but basically, if somebody is willing to do the job, willing to work at it, you give them the knowledge and the direction they need, and then you let them run. And if they stumble along the way, you're there to help guide them and coach them. But more often than not, they do run. They rise to the challenge and they run, and they have domain knowledge to some level in what they're doing. So it's a real learning and discovery process for them. So I think you have to trust that everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody works hard at it. And if they don't, then you also have to initially gently coach, and then you may have to get firmer. Fortunately, I have not had to do a lot of that. I have had to do it, but not a lot of it. I have had really great people working for me, working with me, I like to say.
There is a skill, though, in being a manager who is really supporting a kind of a fail-fast culture, because it means that you are providing them that kind of support to say, yeah, if this is the direction you think we should go. And in technology, this is extremely important, because you have to test things out. And if you fail, you want to fail fast, and you want to pivot and go the other direction. But I find some managers can be a little, and directors and upper level managers can be a little afraid of that fail fast mentality. Do you have any tips for them to say, it's okay, let them try, and if it fails, that's not what you're supposed to do, and move forward?
So there are so many great articles written about the importance of failing fast. And I feel like in tech in particular, because it's such a fast-moving industry, generally there's widespread acceptance and awareness of that. But if you're running into a manager that thinks you should just keep, stay the course, I think the best way to show them that that's not the case is to show the data. You should always make data-driven decisions. And if you can show that something isn't working, why would anybody in their right mind want to continue to do it? So I think that has to be part of the culture, is the ability to A/B test, to fail fast, to continuously try to improve what you're doing. If something is working, well, continue to A/B test, because maybe it can work even better. So I don't subscribe to we should do it that way because that's the way we've always done it. There are always new and better ways to do things. And if they're not better, then we drop back or we try something yet again different. That doesn't mean that you're constantly working in an environment of chaos, because that is also not good. But it does mean that you approach things thoughtfully with data, and you try to make informed decisions, and then you try to iterate to improve.
And when you do that process, what I have learned over the course of my career is that a failure isn't, it's the wrong term. It's a data point that you realize, okay, you've collected enough data to know that that's not the direction you should be going. And there's success in that.
I totally agree. That was going through my mind as you were saying that. A failure is success in that instance. It's only a failure if you keep doing it and you don't realize it's not working. That's a failure.
Right. Right. And we've all done that too. We've all done that plenty of times. That's why when you know to fail fast and you've figured it out that it's not working, it is a success. And that's what I try to tell my team. It's okay. We went down this road. We learned, and now we know where to pivot. And eventually we're going to find our way through the maze, because that's kind of how it happens.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, what a great way to wrap up our conversation today. Heidi, it's been so great spending some time with you. I miss your face, getting to talk to you on a regular basis. But we really appreciate you jumping on and stepping out of your comfort zone to be part of this conversation. And Tracy and I really appreciate you being here. Yeah, Tracy?
I have learned so much. I have learned so much from this time with you, Heidi. So thank you so very much. And ladies out there, if you're really interested in, touching it, getting in touch with your creative side, and you're a good communicator and you're technical, don't be afraid of the marketing track. It's not all that bad. You still have to be technical.
It's a lot of fun. Well, thank you both for having me on. I've really enjoyed the conversation too. And just good to see both of you again. It's been way too long.
Thanks, Heidi. We appreciate it.
Take
All
care.
right, everyone, tune into our next episode. It's coming up to the end of the year, but we're glad you're joining us, and tune in to more Techstrong TV and Techstrong Women. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Previously on Engineering the Change.
There's a lot of startup and tech companies here, and they're all really hungry for, good dev talent.
Hey, I'm Donald.
My name is Carl.
Hi, my name is Stephanie.
The next 10 weeks is going to be really rough.
This is probably one of the most amazing journeys you're going to embark on.
We've been doing basic JavaScript, functions, variables, loops.
You have to celebrate it. Take a moment when you solve a problem to actually celebrate and get excited. And it's cool, you see somebody across the room do that and you're like, yeah.
My high this week has been actually starting, because I know this is the beginning of the rest of my life, as corny as it sounds.
You moved out of strength.
So it was great.
It's been awesome. Everybody here is awesome. The whole experience so far is awesome.
This week, our scholarship winners get a reality check and are forced to step it up as they delve deeper into more challenging coding projects.
So, of all the students, Stephanie is probably the most difficult for me to get a temperature read on.
One of my struggles is not being so hard on myself when I don't understand something.
Stephanie is very quiet in class. She's very focused.
That's pretty cool that I've been able to expand my mind to be able to accept different ways of doing something.
She's on the right track.
Donald came to me earlier today and told me that he felt like he was drowning.
I've still, got to grasp the fundamentals fully.
Donald is another story. He is honestly starting to scare me a little bit.
And right now he's definitely in, I'd say in the bottom 4 or 5. As much as he's struggling, Donald really, really wants this. Carly's going through a lot personally right now. Her house burned down in Haiti twice. in 24 hours.
I lost everything. And over that, I come here, I study, and I will make it.
She is very strong.
If I had to pick someone as the strongest student in the class, 100% I would pick Carly.
Carly, Donald, and Stephanie are beginning to struggle with the high expectations and quick pace of the class.
Last week I thought was hard, but this week I really I had a moment where I was like, can I really do this?
I think I'm doing very well in creating APIs and creating projects with Firebase.
I would say the most important thing is that you can't just specifically focus on just one program. It has to be like, you have to at least focus on, like, I would say the most important ones are SQL and MongoDB.
I know that I am learning and I am retaining, so I just got to give myself the grace and the time to actually be able to continue to consume the information.
When you have a student that's asking really basic fundamental questions or can't answer fundamental questions, then of course we're concerned.
We do this thing where every Friday we have a instructor retro, where the staff sort of get together and talk about the students that are doing good and those that sort of need attention. It was a surprise to me when Dano was mentioned.
He did very, very poorly. The lead instructor, he pulled Dawn aside and said, hey, you either gotta put in way more hours and work twice as hard so you can make it to the end, or you can decide to maybe do this another time. Unfortunately, he kind of just gave up and quit.
In an unexpected turn of events, Donald has dropped out of the class. The two remaining scholarship winners, though stunned, double their efforts and vow to finish strong.
I feel more confident. Thanks to Todd.
My highs are really just feeding off of energy in the classroom, because sometimes when I feel down, like I don't understand, and someone will just say something and it'll just kind of bring me back up.
Everybody loves Wade.
Wade. So that's my high, just being around y'all, and it pushes me.
From the first cohort till now, I still think, they're all superstars.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, this is Mike Rothman, General Manager of Techstrong Research, here from the reInvent 2022 conference, the Techstrong TV studio at the Wynn Hotel. We're doing a bunch of interviews here around the show, and I am very pleased to be joined by Erkang Zheng, the CEO of Jupiter One. I got that right, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, I got that right. So Erkang, welcome to Techstrong
Well, thank
TV.
you. Yeah, I'm excited for this.
How's the show going? I mean, actually, before we jump into that, why don't you give us a sense of both your background a little bit as
Sure.
well as the company, because I know you guys are doing some really cool stuff.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so it's been a really exciting, fun journey for the past 2.5, 3 years. So I've been a security practitioner for all my career for the past 20-something years. Was a former CISO at a software company, and before that was at Fidelity Investments, head of software security, and then IBM Security before that. Right?
May have heard of those.
Yeah, maybe, and Cisco, and yeah.
Oh yeah,
right.
there's another small one out there.
Yeah, no, small ones, and had a little bit of a startup experience in my early career, which actually didn't work out. It was a good learning, right? But I've always wanted to, do I've a bit of that kind of builder mindset, entrepreneur mindset, and wanted to do something of my own. And what's also interesting is, over the past 20-something years, and I've had a lot of my own pain points in cybersecurity. And it kind of really bothers me when you look at the industry that things are just not working. And if you compare it to other industries, let's just say maybe it's medicine, right? So I was at a healthcare software before, so it was fresh in my mind. So people are generally healthier and they live longer, right? So that means over time, if you look at the history of medicine, things are working. But cybersecurity, that's not the case. Breaches are more. There's more of those, and attackers is and so why is it? Why is it that we have so many people here, and there's so much good stuff happening in terms of products and vendors, and why is this still not working? So I think that really triggered me to lean into what is the fundamentals that we're not doing right, and the fundamentals are just we don't know and understand ourselves very much. So I try to ask myself these 5 questions, right? So one is, what do I have? And out of the things I have, what's important? And for those that are important, does it have a problem? And if it has a problem, who can fix it? And then over time, am I getting better? So these 5 fundamental questions, because the environment is so complex, it's very hard to answer at scale. So that's why I created Jupiter One, and the past couple of years has been exciting.
Yeah, no, I bet. So the rough category is attack surface management, or did you have a different category that you made up that you want to deal with?
Attack surface, right? So in Gartner's terms, right, it's a cyber asset attack surface management. But I like to think in more just general, simple terms, right? It's asset visibility, asset management, or next generation CMDB. Focus on relationships and contextual analysis.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, because as we've seen over the last couple of years, things have gotten, I don't know, I'd say what? More complex, maybe a little bit, right? So now not only do we have all the data that, on a bunch of different devices, we've got mobile devices, we've got tablets, we've got other, kind of devices. And then we have all these cloud platforms, right? And clouds can be SaaS, they can be, kind of platform services like your Databricks and your Snowflakes, and you got infrastructure as a service. And obviously we're here at the AWS reInvent show. So everybody's all, hot and bothered about all the cool stuff that AWS is doing here and there. So how do you really kind of get your arms around all this stuff that's out there so that folks can, really get a sense of what their attack surface really looks like?
That's a great question, right? So first, let's think about what attack surface really means, right? What asset really means. And, when people think about it, usually it's, IT asset or device or virtual machine or workload, right? So, something that has an IP address that you can reach. Right, but it's actually a lot more than that.
Sure.
Like, think about companies as a digital company, right? So every company is a digital company nowadays. Then what is digital? It's almost everything and anything is digital. So from workloads to devices to users and identities, and access control and access policies, and code repositories, applications, SaaS products, and then endpoints, and so on and so forth. So all of those things are assets. All of those things can be attack surface, right? And anything that has any value to the business can be attacked. And what's also interesting is we got to look at attack surface, not just at surface level, right? You have to look at attack path.
Sure.
Because all those things are connected. If they're not connected to the operations of a company, then why bother? Yeah. Why do you even have it? Right, so we have to look at this in a way that it is not a siloed. I'm only going to look at cloud. I'm going to look at code. I'm going to look at endpoints by themselves. It only goes so far if you look at those by themselves.
Yep. So your second question was curious to me, right? Because, and that's obviously, is it important, right? Or how important is it?
Yeah.
And how do you gauge that, right? Because, I mean, in my experience, and I've been doing security, probably for as long as you have, maybe I had a lot more gray hair, right? So maybe a little bit longer on that front. But it's always been, ask somebody what's important to them and they go, yeah, my stuff. Right. So when you take a step back, and you've done this in large scale environments, Fidelity and the like, I mean, how do you get a real sense about what is truly important to the company from an asset standpoint? Because if you ask the guy, everybody, they're going to say, yeah, my stuff is the most important stuff.
Yeah. That's a great question. Right? It's very hard to answer. And there's a lot of business context that has to be applied, right? So some of those are, technological concepts or attributes that you have to understand. And some of those are truly kind of business attributes that you have to understand about the assets. Now, because of this complexity, right? So some of Jupiter One's customers have thousands and tens of thousands of cloud environments, AWS accounts. And within each one of those and thousands and tens of thousands of assets and resources. Sure. So combined, right, there are millions of them. So if you say that everything's important, then nothing is important. That's right. Right? So you can't have a million people looking at a million things constantly, and they all change over time and all the time. So to define what's important, well, first of all, you have to have some business attribute associated, right? So perhaps it's the value, perhaps it's the impact, perhaps it's, for example, an application and how many users depend on it, how many customers depend on it, right? So these are attributes that you can enrich onto the asset itself. Now, there are other ways that you can that contribute to what a critical asset means. If you have an application deployed to production, then that application and the infrastructure supporting an application could be important. If you have a user with access to customer data, then of course the data is important, and that user also becomes critical.
Yep.
Right. So what we can see is it is not a single definition that defines what's important. It's more about connecting the dots and understand the relationships and the context to derive on what's important.
Now, do you guys walk the customer through, kind of that process? Is it something that you do with, some big brain in the sky, ML type thing that finds all these relationships and says, you know what, I think that's important. Tell me that it's not important, right? And then, get the customer, 90% of the way there or 60% of the way.
Yeah. So it does require some user input, but by and large, it's automated by Jupiter One building a graph model based on auto discovery of the assets, right? So we are an agentless platform that uses APIs and read-only credentials to discover those assets. And as part of the aggregation and discovering all of those assets, we build out the connections, build out this kind of Google Map type of thing, right?
Yeah.
For all of the connectiveness of how one thing connects to another and to another, right? And by doing that, we use a set of definitions and traversals, which then the customers can tweak and update based on their own to identify the relationships and the context. And that context drives not only the definition of criticality, but also definitions of what could be wrong and what might be a noise, or and who might be the owner, and so on and so forth.
No, that's cool.
Yeah, and that's really a lot of the automation that goes into it.
Yeah, because that's always been the, again, whether we were talking about DLP back in the day, right? Kind of how do you categorize and classify data and keep it, kind of up to date and current.
Yeah.
And now that we're talking about, again, millions of assets for a typical large enterprise, again, how do you just, kind of get a sense of what's important?
What's important.
Case? So let's kind of dig in a little bit on the whole agent. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and you know what's also tricky about this is every organization's definition of critical assets are slightly different.
Yeah.
Right. And even if it's just a little bit different, then what that means is oftentimes a vendor solution then doesn't work.
Right.
Because it's just not their definition, right, of what critical is. And that's a lot of times where some of these kind of DLP products, it gets hard to implement, right? Because it's just hard.
Oh, that's the least of their problems, mate.
That's right. So I think the beauty of how we've done it, right, is really we give you the out of the box, easy to get started type of experience. But on top of that, it's a true platform that is data driven. You use the data and you use your own queries and your own taggings to customize the entire experience of the platform, including not just the reporting, but the visualization and the alerting, and all of those are fully data-driven. And I think that's the part that really people are missing, right? So it's something that can truly tailor to the unique nature of their business.
That's right. And I think when you kind of really kind of take a step back and look at kind of the evolution of how we used to do, vuln management, right? Or just vuln scanning, right? And
Yeah.
discovery from, hey, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to, just kind of try to find all the IP addresses, maybe passive monitoring or anything like that. And we really didn't have a lot of the analytical horsepower engine that we have now in order to do a lot of that analytics. So it's one of these things that, again, whether it's your company or other, competitors in the, attack surface management space, a lot of this has been enabled by, kind of a lot of the cool technical stuff. Again, especially a lot of the stuff that we see here at AWS, right? I mean, do you have a data center? Do you guys have a data center?
We do not.
You don't, right?
Yeah.
And because why would you? You were a company started 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And, nobody gets up this morning and says, "Gosh, I really should build a data center today," right? I mean,
that's right.
You come and you
why recreate the wheel,
right? And you know what? AWS does a pretty good job about managing things, right? And storing a whole mess of data and the like. So these platforms are really enabling very innovative and cool new security tech, right? For guys who've been doing this for a long time, if you would have said to me, 15 years ago, Mike, hey, you're going to be able to aggregate all of your, kind of millions of assets in, one place and do, kind of cool analytics to really find patterns of things that you didn't even know to look for, I would have said, please get out of my office because I've got work to do, right? And because it just wasn't a thing.
You're right. Yeah, timing is everything, right? And the maturity of the industry is also what drives you to this point. And frankly, 15, 20 years ago, there's just not this level of complexity.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was manageable. Right? And today, without this, it's just...
we started by, things haven't gotten better. So it wasn't like we started out, things were great, and then now they suck, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's just gotten worse over time. But but that's why we exist, right? So new technologies like J1 exist because of that.
It's funny. I wrote something on Security Boulevard last week, and it was kind of like my little ode to Thanksgiving, and everybody says, oh, we got to be thankful for this, and my statement was thanks for nothing, right? Because again, it's that same thing. Whereas we wake up every morning as a security person, and we're like, we feel like we're further from the shore. And it's like, man, I worked hard yesterday. I wrote a lot yesterday, and I look, and I'm like further from the shore, right?
That's right. That's
the security ethos, which is kind of problematic when you're a security person.
Exactly. Well, you mentioned a couple of things. I want to talk about those a little bit, right? So one is vulnerability management, and two is security people and maybe talents and skills, right? So vulnerability management is an interesting thing, and I think you would argue that any proactive security is vulnerability management. Right, so we have all of these terms that we call themselves, CSPM, DSPM, ASPM, and SSPM, or whatnot, right? At the end of the day, aren't those vulnerabilities, findings, misconfigurations should be a form of vulnerability, right? And I think, and again, it boils down to the way that you look at vulnerabilities. Are you looking at findings, or are you looking at assets or attack surface? Right? Which one matters the most? I would argue, why would you care about the findings if you don't know what your assets and attack surface are?
That's right.
Right. So one of our customers, Robinhood, actually transformed their vulnerability management program into a asset-centric view rather than a finding-centric view, right? Because at the end of the day, any vulnerability, whether it's a scanner finding or misconfiguration, is all about does it have a problem? Right? You know your assets, you know what's important, and then does it have a problem? Right? And then the last part that's also tricky then is how do you find the owner? Right? So that's the tricky part.
Right. Well, great question, right? So again, here at AWS, one of the things that you can do fairly easily is tag all these assets, right? So do you find in your environment or your customers' environments that tagging is largely adopted? Is it for ownership? Is it for organizational unit? Is it for operational? Is it for criticality, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do from a tagging standpoint. What I found, right? Again, I've been doing this, 12, 13 years in the cloud at this point. Most folks have no idea what to do with tagging, right? And they can do it, but they don't do it. And in a lot of cases, still they're as blind as they were, from day one.
Yeah, I think that's an unfortunate reality. And I think this is what contributes to a lot of the garbage in, garbage out situation, right? When you do data analytics, right? So we highly recommend customers do tagging, right? So tagging can be how you classify data, and tagging can be who are the owners, or tagging can be organization units or projects or applications, right, and systems, and there's multiple ways of tagging it. Now, this goes back to two interesting parts, right? So one is tagging is inconsistent, right? So nobody, I can guarantee you, 100% of all companies, nobody has done a complete tagging of their resources. It just doesn't exist. There are people who might be doing nothing versus slightly better or maybe close to complete, but nobody is complete in their tagging. So now then this goes to where a graph model like J1 can do more inference based on partial tagging, right? Because if you come in and say I got nothing is tagged,
right,
then we're kind of out of luck,
yeah,
right? But if you have just a little bit of starting point, then we can walk the traverse of the graph to understand tagging from the hierarchy and the the parent-child relationship and so on, right? So kind of infer what the right tag should be at whatever levels, and that's how we also define ownership, right? So let me give you an example, right? So if I have a production workload that is not tagged, and you say, who is the owner? Now, what we can do is we say, well, let's walk two paths, right? So path one is, what is the service that workload belongs to? Does the service has an owner? If the service doesn't have an owner, what is the owner of the AWS account?
Yeah.
And you better be tagging at least at the account level, right? So who the account owner is, right? The account has a contact email, right? So this way we can at least determine what is the closest, right? So that's one path. The second path is, how is this provisioned? Because usually it's infrastructure as code, right? Is it CloudFormation? Is it Terraform? Yeah. Which code repository created this resource? Then does the code repo have an owner, right? If the code repo does not have an owner, then who are the latest pull requests? Who created the latest pull requests? Well, somebody has to create this pull request and make those changes. And that's associated with some GitHub user or some developer, right? So we can, just by walking the graph, infer the closest owner to that resource.
Yeah.
So that's the nature of what J1 provides that other platform cannot.
Right.
Right.
And that's what and again, as we one, I think that's a great kind of overview of kind of some of the challenges and how you've addressed some of the challenges of historically figuring out what's happening. I don't want to neglect the fact that we are at AWS. I know you guys are announcing a
we are an AWS partner, right? So we're making some announcements on how we are doubling down on that partnership, right? So AWS is part of JupyterOne's Stellar Partner Program as well. And, we have joint go-to-market, right? So J1 is on AWS Marketplace, and we're in their startup program, right? So there's some of those details we'll be sharing in the news today or tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds great. How do folks get in touch with JupyterOne if they want to, check out what you guys can offer on the attack surface management standpoint?
Just go check it out on the website, jupyterone.com.
JupyterOne.com.
The planet Jupiter and ONE.com. Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
That's right. There you go.
Good. Well, Erkan, I want to thank you for your time and appearing with us here at Techstrong TV at the AWS reInvent conference. Great to chat. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. We'll be back with another interview shortly.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here in Vegas at reInvent. One of the nice things about coming to a conference with 55,000 of your friends is you get to really see people who really were your friends. Still are your friends. Want to introduce you to my friend right here to my right. This is Mike Griever. He's going to tell you about his new venture in just a moment, but just some way of introduction. As I've said on here many times, part of my background is I helped co-found a company called Still Secure based out of Boulder, Colorado. Mitchell Ashley, our CTO and principal analyst here at Techstrong, who was one of my co-founders there. Another important piece of the puzzle was this guy right here, Mike Griever. Mike, I had the pleasure of working with Mike for a bunch of years. That's still secure. And I took him from the sales team into business development, and I like him to think in some small way it set him off on his path. But he's done a lot more since then. I'll tell you all about it. Hey, Mike, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Alan, great to be here.
Absolutely.
Great to reconnect.
Absolutely. I haven't seen Mike, well, certainly since before COVID, but
Yeah.
even a little bit before that. Sitting to Mike's right is Mike's co-founder at his new company, which we're going to talk about, Miguel Cervantes.
Yeah.
And Miguel is I don't know as much about you because I never worked with you, but you're going to tell us in just a minute. But before we get into the personal stuff, let's talk about CloudForce.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks for the intro. Thanks for having us. So, CloudForce basically came from an idea that Miguel and I had shared. We're both ex-Amazonians at AWS. Worked on the networking side in the APN and with partners building and scaling cloud platforms and hybrid cloud. CloudForce was an idea that we got from the field. So our partners, our ISV partners, our customers, everyone basically was running into what is commonly known as the skills gap in the industry. So basically, when you go to set up your cloud platform, there's certain fundamental services that we think need to be standardized as a utility layer to basically get you to a build now state. So whether you're doing DevOps or SecOps or you're building 5G applications, what CloudForce does is basically orchestrates these 5 fundamental services for you into a no-code SaaS platform to get you to innovate faster, basically. So what we've done is we've taken those concepts, brought them all together, and we launched a company called CloudForce. And the product we call it a virtual cloud architect. So Miguel's position at AWS was a systems architect. A lot of the industry terms, it could be a cloud architect or a DevOps engineer or an SRE engineer, tons of different titles. But basically what the role of a cloud architect is basically building those cloud platforms and getting you to a build ready state and a consistent state. So that's where the virtual cloud architect comes in, is to augment your team and your delivery model to make things work a little bit more smoothly.
So one of the emerging roles we're hearing a lot about is this so-called platform engineer.
Yeah.
Right? That's the hot thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Is this kind of a virtual platform engineer? Or is it relevant to the platform engineering role?
Yeah, I'll take that. So essentially, like Mike was saying, right, we're basically building the platform for the customer, right? So if you look at the role of the cloud architect, there's kind of 2 halves. There's taking care of the day-to-day utility layer of the cloud, then also helping development teams with their day-to-day, like, hey, I want to use a service. I need this role kind of templated out for me, or I need guidance on the service. So that's 2 halves of the world. So what we did is basically did the first half. We built the utility layer, which what everyone struggles with. And so that's where you would find that platform engineer kind of living. And so what we're doing is virtualizing that experience, whereas today it's mainly people driven. So what we're doing is augmenting that, taking away that half from them and let them work on differentiating work with developers.
What we found is, being in the cloud, we joined Amazon in 2014, and as the explosion of the cloud and the adoption gets a little bit more mature, a lot of people don't realize, and that's where the term platform engineer, probably the genesis of, is as you actually start maturing the platform and adding applications and users and regions and multi-cloud, and you really find out that utility layer, those fundamentals of the platform need to be consistently governed and maintained. And right now, there's really not a product that does that. So that's CloudForce. That's what we're focusing on.
Excellent. You mentioned 5 things.
Yeah.
Let's list them out for the audience. What are the 5
Sure.
things?
So basically, the virtual cloud architect deploys what we call the cloud platform operating model, which consists of 5 pillars. So the first pillar is orchestration. So right now, as we discussed, it's mostly a person or a people or an SI or infrastructure as code, a manual effort. So the first stage is actually orchestrating it and removing the need for actual code. So a no-code orchestration of the platform, consistent. The first application would be the accounts, which basically your account setup, your OU, your organizational structure, your guardrails. The second aspect of it would be your cost. So your cost optimization, your usage, your billing tracking, basically automating that. So no manual billing tags, or if you're using a financial ops tool, something that actually collects all the logs and the data for you, makes it easy to consume. The next one would be the security and the identity and access management. So your IAM roles, your naming convention, your SSO, your security controls, your data residency governance, all of those guardrails and services, making those consistent. And the last is really the networking and the connectivity, which is often a lot of the sticky point of the cloud. And building hybrid clouds is standardizing those VPCs and your IPAM and your DNS hosted zones and your private and your public connectivity and SD-WAN, and basically packaging those all together to actually create a holistic platform and keeping it consistent.
I love it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So, look, I want to be clear with the audience, right? You're early in CloudForce. You just reference customers.
Yeah.
Looking for people to, potentially use the product, feedback. It's not GA yet.
No, we're definitely, we are just launching our public beta right now. So we have, a couple of reference customers in our alpha complete, but now it's basically time to start taking it to, more of a general audience. So really targeting, AWS startups, mid-tier companies as well, AWS Control Tower users, Terraform users, people that need to build consistent accounts and landing zones. That's really the first stage. And then people that actually have, have maybe that maturity or have experience in the cloud. That's, maybe you're experiencing some cloud drift or cost spikes. Basically the platform could be cleaned up a little bit. Those are people that actually would use this early as well.
I love it. Someone out here says, yeah, that's us. I want to check this out. How do they go about it?
Well, you can find us at cloudforce.io. Reach out there. We have a form. You can kind of just put your information in and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Yep. We also have, we're starting our blog as well. So basically, introducing the concept of the cloud platform operating model and a virtual cloud architect to augment your team. There's a lot of cool bits and bytes in there for, in the field traction and experiences that we have.
Well, I think you mentioned that Miguel was, well, you're both ex-AWS folks. And so there's a lot of, I don't want to say inside knowledge, but there's a lot of, AWS learn the hard way, have the t-shirts and scarves to prove it, know-how built into CloudForce.
Absolutely.
Do you see a time where we take this to other cloud, or is this strictly in AWS?
Well, I think, with anyone's cloud strategy, we discuss this all the time, is you have a primary public cloud, and then the next step is usually how do we actually, maximize, and standardize and get that, into a build state and a consistent state for growth and sustained growth. And then we also look at a world that Miguel and I had worked in is really the hybrid space as well. So connecting that to the data center and building that cloud platform down to the data center.
Yep.
So if you're using like VMware Cloud on AWS or OpenShift or Direct Connects or Outposts, that's really kind of the first model that we're concentrating on. Is let's get the primary solid and then figure out how to extend that to hybrid, and then from there look at potentially multi-cloud down the road.
Got it. Cloudforce.io. You can go check it out there. Hey, Mike and Miguel, I wish you guys nothing but a lot of success. Knowing this guy the way I do, I'm sure this is going to be a great tool, a great platform, a great company for people out there who, because we forget, right? I've had this discussion a few times. You're out here with 55,000 people. You think the whole world is already, very advanced on cloud, and we're all using DevOps and all of these things. There's still more compute on non-cloud than there is on cloud, right? So the future here is still ahead of it, right? A big chunk of that mainstream audience is still migrating and moving to cloud.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of different numbers out there and reports that say there's 10% or 20% or 7% of the IT spend and applications are headed to the cloud. They're still on-prem. Different analyst firms say that 20, 25, like 90% of new applications will be cloud native. There's a lot of maturity, a lot of growth. Again, as we say, a lot of the blocking and tackling that still needs to be,
No,
mastered.
but these people who are transforming, migrating, one of the nice things about being a later adopter rather than the early adopter is hopefully you've had the chance for tools like CloudForce,
Absolutely.
right, to come out and make their life easier instead of having to figure this out the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, no, also what you find is no matter how big you are as a customer, whether you're a big enterprise or just getting started, everyone has those same problems at the platform layer.
Right.
It's all the same.
Mhm.
Everything above is what the companies do, right?
Absolutely. Hey guys, thanks for stopping by today. Check them out at cloudforce.io. We'll follow Mike and Miguel's story here as they continue to build it out. But for now, we're out. We're here at Techstrong TV at AWS reInvent. We'll be back in a little bit with just some more guests and interviews.
Hey everyone, happy Thursday. Cody J. Brown here with some programs coming up next week at Techstrong Learning. So we are getting started Tuesday, January 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Join Trilio and Techstrong Research to learn about the top things to consider when migrating to a multi-cloud environment and how to handle the added complexity of multiple platforms. They'll also discuss the pros and cons of different migration tools and the best approaches for migrating various types of applications. Following at 3 p.m. Eastern, Cloud Ops teams face the challenge of managing and optimizing cloud spend in increasingly complex environments. In this program, experts from Stitch Fix and Datadog will share how they gained better visibility into cloud costs and improved management and optimization through the use of Datadog's Cloud Cost Monitoring solution. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from their experiences and improve your own cloud cost management. Now, looking at Wednesday, January 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern, we are joined by Plutora to discuss how to deliver value faster, securely, and with high quality through the use of continuous testing in your software factory. They'll review the challenges of balancing velocity and quality and provide actionable ways to immediately implement continuous testing as a first step in your digital transformation. Join us to understand the dynamic of the speed-quality trade-off and see how you can optimize it through the use of continuous testing. And our final program next week is on Wednesday, January 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Join this panel discussion with DevOps experts to learn how to prevent unexpected downtime and gain control over your cloud environments using infrastructure as code. Discover the benefits of IAC and how it can help you manage any unmanaged resources, including legacy code and resources used by other teams. So that's all I've got for you right now, but we have more programs next week that I didn't mention, and if you just can't wait till then, feel free to look through our on-demand programs at devops.com/webinars, and be sure to look in the on-demand section. Have a great Friday and a better weekend.
This is Techstrong TV.
Well, today I have the great pleasure of being joined by Charles Horton. Charles is COO with NetSpy. Welcome, Charles.
Hey, thanks, Mitch, for having me on.
It's always good to have a security conversation with a colleague in security. Cloud and software and security is such an interesting world. Before we jump into that, because I know you've got some news, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about NetSpy.
Yeah, sure. My name's Charles Horton. I'm COO at NetSpy, like you said. I've been in security for a minute or two, Mitch. I don't want to date myself. I've been with NetSpy for about 5 years and a little over 5 years, and just really fortunate to play a part in the NetSpy growth story. A little bit about NetSpy. Founded early 2000s, founder-led organization. And when I joined in 2017, I was just really impressed with the people, the client base, the reputation, and the DNA of the organization is really in offensive security testing. And we do that, and whenever you talk to somebody about NetSpy, a common theme is really the intersection of talent and technology. We'll never be a push button pen testing firm. We always have experts behind all of the solutions that we provide. But really, leveraging technology as a force multiplier for our people, leveraging offensive security methodologies in everything that we do. And the success that we've had is really a testament to the team that we have in place. So as we've grown, we've introduced penetration testing as a service, attack surface management. We're going to get ready to release breach and attack simulation, some platforms that we have to help our clients and the broader market just solve for their ever evolving security needs.
I think how much things have evolved since early 2000s when I got in securities and NetSpy was kicking off the ground. Great to have you all. You're a great member of the security community, so it's good to be talking with you and the NetSpy team. So you've got an announcement that just came out. Tell us about what's happening.
Yeah, so NetSpy is always looking to grow. Most of our growth has been organic, and we've been fortunate. We've got KKR and 1011 Ventures have been really supportive in, potentially looking at inorganic growth and M&A opportunities. So we're announcing the acquisition of a pen testing company called Invisium, and really, it takes a lot to put these things together. And Mitch, if you've been around, all of the different M&A types and growth opportunities that you have, and we're opportunistic about that. So it's part of our growth strategy, and really, it's the combination of amazing talent and the trusted client relationships that Invisium brings to the table. We're really bringing together two innovative and culturally aligned security companies that, are committed to delivering penetration testing at the highest level. And these things all look great and sound great at the start of a deal. They look great on a spreadsheet from an investor perspective. But the real opportunity there is for a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario. So combining these organizations, Invisium is deep in cloud and application testing. It's going to just really allow us to expand the depth and breadth of our solutions that we take to the market and take to clients, as well as take the full NetSpy portfolio to Invisium clients. It's an exciting opportunity for us, and something that we've been in the works for a little while, and glad to see and excited for this announcement.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations on that announcement. Acquisitions, as you were kind of pointing out, are always interesting, right? Sometimes it's getting the technology, getting a customer base, maybe getting some skills and experience in new areas. What would you say is kind of the biggest area you were looking for taking that advancement in? Was it doing more cloud kind of work? Was it a different kind of customer base? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think both of those. The great thing about this opportunity is there's very little overlap in the customer base. So it's really an expansion opportunity, and the trusted relationships that Invisium has with their clients, I think, is going to allow us to talk to them more about NetSpy solutions and other ways that we can help them. And obviously, Mitch, as well as I do, there's tremendous energy and investment around cloud. I mean, I don't know how long we've been talking about it, but it's here. Organizations continue to make that investment in cloud, and it's going to continue to be a cornerstone of their, overall risk as an organization, as well as, their security strategy. So I think you triangulate a few of those things and couple that with the talent that they bring to the table. It's a recipe for success.
Fantastic. How is adding their pen testing capabilities, service offerings, combined with NetSpy's products? What's that synergy? You're talking about 1 + 1 equals 3, right? That kind of a synergistic effect. How are you going to achieve that? It's the things that make that happen.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, you really have to be thoughtful around how you design, your next gen solutions that really combine the best that both organizations do. Because a lot of times, you get into, these types of scenarios, and there's an imbalance between, who wins and who loses, or who's right and who's wrong. This is an opportunity for really us to harness the intelligence that and services that both organizations have developed, and develop something new going forward. So for us, the process and what that looks like, M&A, you're always going to have, your HR integration, your systems integration, but you really have to be thoughtful when it comes to, your client experience as well as your employee experience. And for us, that process is really getting our experts in a room together, and everybody, that's where you need that cultural alignment. If you don't have that, your chances of success are going to face some headwinds. But if you have that, and everybody is passionate about what they do, everybody's passionate about, solving these very complex security problems, they're naturally going to look for, the best advantages that we can have. So the insights that the Invisium team bring to the table, along with the insights that NetSpy has, combining them, as well as interesting, technology pieces. How do we deploy those? How do we, take those to market? Are going to be things that we're going to have to solve, and we're going to have to solve them together.
Yeah, you were talking about the cloud and evolution of where we've come through, where we're going. It seems the great thing for security, at least, is it's not getting less complex, it's getting more complex. There are new, different ways, whether it's cloud native or WebAssembly on the horizon for folks, or whatever it might be, new ways of thinking about how we build in applications or secure networks, secure cloud environments. It's kind of it's like a barrage. All that is hitting us at once, right? And so which opportunity do you take sometimes can be even the greater challenge of where do you focus? How do you tackle that challenge?
Yeah, it's not easy.
I don't give you easy questions. So
right, yeah, I was expecting a softball. Yeah, could you throw a softball here? Well, I think, if you look at just things, they have a tendency to go from simplicity to complexity, then back to simplicity. Well, this is not going back to simplicity anytime soon. Just the rapid pace of change in architectures. You think about it, Mitch, the amount of code and the amount of ones and zeros that's out in the universe today is more than there was yesterday. And tomorrow there's going to be more than there is today. So for us to be able to tackle that takes, expertise. It takes collaboration. It takes tooling. It takes telemetry. There's so much that goes into understanding the context of these environments that, and not everybody has the same footprint either. So it's a difficult challenge. But we've been in cloud since 2018. One of our VPs of research published a book on cloud penetration testing. Really, it's having those experts, but also synthesizing that expertise throughout the organization and throughout the teams and continuing to grow our expertise at scale, that's the real challenge, because every organization can have a guy that knows the thing about the thing, right? If you want to talk about cloud, talk to Mitch. He's right over there in that office. But to be able to do it as an organization with how complex and how fast they change really takes a lot of people working together to share information. And we have technology that fosters that collaboration, and really comes down to our culture, our core values of striving for excellence that keep us continuing to drive forward there. But it certainly can be intimidating at times.
Yeah, it's exciting. As you think about 2023, so the announcement happened on the 10th of January of the acquisition. As you're thinking about the next year plus, what are some of the challenges customers are on the forefront for them in this environment that we're in?
Well, I think customers are looking for, they'll continue to want, comprehensive solutions that can scale, but they're really looking for expertise, not only in a specific application or in their cloud environment, in their Kubernetes, but they're looking for expertise and for people to really understand what does their footprint look like, what are their risks, and then what do they need to do to help mitigate those risks. And you couple that with, Mitch, we're coming through a pandemic, we're coming through a couple years of a lot of social changes as well. The uncertainty of the marketplace in 23, with investment and where companies are they going to continue to invest in those important things at the same level as they have the last couple of years. So a lot of things around 2023 are going to unfold in the upcoming months, but security testing is foundational. And, thematically, we know that our clients want to continue to test more, and they want to be able to continue to test continuously, but they also don't want just an annual point in time test. I mean, you think about CI/CD frameworks and how development is changing. You're going to see penetration testing, security testing, and protection continue to evolve to complement those themes and those work patterns and behaviors to make it more precise, more incremental, always on. And those are things that we're excited to participate in and hopefully play a big role in that.
I think about the environment where that microservice I'm working on right now might be in production in an hour. Be good to pen test it before it goes out.
Yeah, and you can't. Like it's very difficult to do that today. If you say, "Hey, I've got this component, and I need some assurance," and you can point some tooling at it, but tooling is only going to get maybe half of vulnerabilities that are identified. It's the human aspect that still outpaces any sort of tooling, which is why we focus on the talent and experts that we have. Every solution that we put forward has experts behind it. Our attack surface management has penetration testing experts behind it. Breach and attack simulation, same thing, but really, when we think about conceptually our penetration testing as a service, this always on concept, more incremental, more frequent, to where eventually, you'll be able to say, "Hey, I've got this component, I need it tested." And, whoever's doing that would have the right context for what it interfaces with, where it's going to sit, what data it's going to have access to, what the other environment variables are, and be able to provide some assurance. That's ultimately one of the goals, but there are other ways that we can advance, the overall coverage and depth of penetration testing, because the cost of it is, can be prohibitive. And you think about, Mitch, in today's world, what's not being tested, at least to a high degree. I think you've brought it up before, supply chain. I mean, there's a number of things that just aren't being tested that are big problems, and huge opportunities for adversaries, for sure.
That certainly, and supply chain certainly elevated onto our radar in the past year or 2 years, that's for sure. Well, congratulations on the announcement, on the acquisition. Where can folks find out more about that, or NetSpy services? I know you're involved in open source, a lot of great things you're doing.
Yeah, we have a lot of, our technical teams contribute a lot to blogs, tooling in the open source community that's on GitHub. Our NetSpy website has a lot of that content, or a directory of where you can find additional content. For me, I'm on LinkedIn, happy to connect and collaborate with anybody at any time, especially on security topics, which are, extremely fun to talk about. So those would be the places to start.
All right, great deal. And netspy.com, NETSPI, right? Is that correct?
Yep, NETSPI.com.
All right, it's Monday. I'm, on my day. So still getting my tongue working here. All right,
looking good, Mitch.
Charles, it was great talking with you. Thanks for coming by. And let's come back. I'd love to hear some more. Come back and tell us a little bit about how post-acquisition that's going, maybe some of the new things that you have going on. I'd love to talk to you again.
You say that to everybody.
Yes, I do. No, I'm not that specifically, but yeah, I do want you to come by. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Mitch.
All right. Thanks, Charles.
This is Techstrong TV.
Well, I have the great pleasure today of being joined by Chris Darcy. Chris is founder of Ecom Pricer. Welcome, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Mitch. Yeah,
good to be talking with you. Tell us a little bit about you and also about your company, Ecom Pricer.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm the founder of Ecom Pricer, and what essentially we do is we use AI to manage discounts on online stores automatically on a user-by-user basis. So what essentially that's allowed for us to do is create a method to not only allow stores to tailor discounts to customers and then get higher profit out of that, but also ensure that customers who really need discounts and are unlikely to convert without them do get those discounts. So it feels like a really nice application that works out well for everyone.
So I'm curious, is it about getting the right discounts to the right people, or is it getting the right products to the right people at the discounted price, or both?
Oh, the right discounts to the right people is really what we focus on. So essentially, we, our product is an AI that just manages the dishing out those discounts to the right people. Mm-hmm. So when a user comes in, essentially a call is made to our servers, and then it goes and decides based on who showed up, what discounts need to be applied in order for them to be most likely to convert. And in practice, what that ends up meaning is that users with less means or who are going to be less able to afford a product end up being given discounts, and those who are able to afford it without end up paying full price or closer to full price. And what that essentially does is it boosts overall conversions and profit margins, but also ensures that people who otherwise would be priced out are able to purchase.
Okay, very good. Well, I know from your background, through your studies, your PhD with the Alan Turing Institute, machine learning, behavioral economics, and your exit to do a startup or do a company. Tell us, I would say AI is an important part of your whole career, from your educational background studies and then into to business and being an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about AI as a study, why you chose that field to go into, and then the role it's played in Ecom Pricer.
Well, I've always been, from when I was very young, I was always really interested in financial markets and how unpredictable they were. And so when I went through to start university, I did mathematics, and what essentially I found there was that, there was a lot of interesting stuff in there, but not a lot of it could be applied in the fields I really wanted it to. So there wasn't a lot that I could do initially that would really work with stochastic systems and random systems and all the noise and heavy-tailedness that you kind of encounter day to day. And as I pushed more and more towards statistics and then through to mathematical modeling, it kind of gradually progressed towards AI as being more the venue where, the best problems and the best tools for tackling those kind of real world applications with that healthy dose of randomness sat. So essentially, being able to merge with behavioral econ did allow for, some really nice interaction with people who at the end of the day are very unpredictable, and do have a lot of interesting behaviors. So essentially there was always a wealth of tools, but it was finding the tools best suited to problems in the real world.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Wow. What a great path. Timing is everything, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's really advanced, and machine learning has kind of brought it to the forefront for a lot of us. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, being able to just build a neural network on your laptop and set that going with, that's only really been capable. It's only really been something you could do within the sort of first 5 years of my undergrad, and I'm really very thankful for that. Without the ability to do that and to experiment, I really would not be here today.
Fantastic. Well, talk a little bit about Econ Pricer and the role that AI has played in both your formation of the idea of what you're doing and then the execution of it.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. So essentially, I left my PhD to start SciGood, which was still functioning and filling work. It's a data science and AI consulting business. And so largely what I did there was, it was a lot of fintech work. So building out systems that could, forecast defaults, building out systems that could, algorithmic trading systems were a big thing we actually are still doing. That takes up still a lot of my time. But what we, while they're essentially trying to figure out, consulting doesn't scale as well as a product offering can. And, looking through the really vast code base we built up, what I did find was that there was a lot of stuff we had there that could be well applied to pricing decisions. So what price to show, what person, what discount to show, what person in order to maximally convert. And that's something that doesn't really exist in industry now. There are some ancient legacy companies, this Revionics, for example, which is, again, very old, and a few kind of companies of that ilk, but they largely, the technology there isn't necessarily similar tech. And in practice, they're, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. You get a team of consultants that will come over. They're not really accessible to SMEs. So what we did on our side is we brought over some reinforcement learning tech that we had that was particularly well suited to these kind of tasks. And we built a system that could integrate with websites and swap out discounts and prices in order to maximize overall conversions and profit. So that's been, kind of where we got to where we were. The reinforcement learning bent was really big for us, and again, this is, right place, right time, since again, reinforcement learning has only been really practical for applications in the past few years.
Mm-hmm. Tease that apart a little bit more. I'm familiar with expert systems, but that kind of the learning part of it, tell us a little bit more about that specialty part of AI.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So essentially what we have here is we have, a website with customers coming in. It is, a customer will come in, they'll come in repeatedly, and there's lots of customers who will come in frequently. Your actions with the customers, so what prices and discounts to display, affect their behavior and their future behavior. And what you're really trying to do on your end is you're maximizing a reward, which is your overall conversions. So you have all the pieces there necessary for, really a standard reinforcement learning application. Lots of people tend to think of these problems, and HubSpot is a great example of this. Is a great example of this. Actually, they do publish a lot of work kind of in that realm, where they talk about contextual multi-armed bandits is a very specific problem. And so in our case, what we essentially did was we built some scripts that would take in data, but of course not too much. We do stay GDPR compliant, and would then very quickly process that and make decisions about what discounts should be shown, and then learn from what it's done. So we have conversion data for all our clients, in order to make sure that the system trains, so we can link up customers, what we've done, and what the outcome was. And in doing that at scale and building means to be able to compare customers across different clients, but we built a way that not only can we, for any individual client, allocate discounts effectively, but new clients who come in, we can also learn from that existing corpus and effectively allocate those discounts off the bat. So really, it's been taking the risk out of things has been a key goal on our side, which we've done very well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So are you building kind of on a large database of past history that you apply machine learning algorithms to, and now let's personalize that to the individual who's at the site? Or you really is it more of a model that you've built that you're applying to their interaction while they're on the site?
So the model we built was very key, but also the data that we've collected is a large part of what makes us unique, I think. The hardest part of getting this running was getting initial clients, because essentially we're taking control of our clients' pricing with no data, and just while they're running very expensive ad campaigns. But we were very fortunate that our first few clients have been essentially really cool about the whole thing. They just kind of, those first ones when we didn't have data, let us start running, and we used a whole lot of we had some priors to begin with. We had things like we could make assumptions about iPhone users spending more, and we could look at historical spend to go and make estimates of what would happen. So we set that up right. But once we started collecting the data, we ended up having an advantage that no one else could easily replicate. It is very, very hard to convince someone to let you run a pricing model without price data. But now that we've collected that data and we have a nice pool of customers, new customers as they come in, we can always make predictions about how different changes will perform and what will happen and what should happen. So we're getting, all the time we're getting better and better with that fast startup, and in particular, we've always been confident in our ability to make more money for our clients. We guarantee it. The ROI for our product has always been guaranteed at 200%. So, we will never charge you if you're not making money from us.
Mm-hmm. One of the things about pricing models, even product models, they can be extremely complex themselves, especially in a retail setting. Well, not even just retail. I'm curious if the fact that you're using AI technology and the data that you have, if that might also help you take advantage of some of those pricing models and maybe doing some unique things with AI.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do want to kind of expand outside of, largely right now we're good for setting up prices, on stores and, for online sellers. So, it very much, it does fall into the quite traditional, do you put discounts on a sneaker? But we also run with clients who do things like web hosting and marketing services on subscription, so really anything where you can click a buy button online. But in practice, we'd also be keen to try and move that. We know a lot of the tools can be applied in cases where you have customer data in a physical setting. And that is something we want to eventually, kind of shift to. That would be, again, a really fun thing to tackle. But for right now, we're kind of focusing on really dialing this in as much as we can. We feel very confident on the product, And now what we're trying to do is make sure that we can get the message out there that, a product like this does exist. We can, we're essentially provide a great benefit with, no risk, and then trying to make sure that people are at least aware of us. So the education part is honestly the hardest of all of this.
Mm-hmm. That's actually something I wanted to ask you. Just speaking of education, what do you think what's the greatest misunderstanding people have about using AI in a product as part of your strategy?
Honestly, people, I find once they start talking about AI, they start wondering if they have to go and do stuff. For some reason, seems to be a big thing. The more we talk about the technical side, the more people start trying to involve their CTO or the tech team or things like that and start asking about resources and what data they can add to it and how our API calls work. What we've largely found is that, just like any other, statistical technique, it's probably best if people don't really know how the sausage is made. AI does say at the end of the day that we do have some kind of cool technique up and running, but we found that giving customers too much information about the details of how it works rather than the outcomes for how it works just leads to confusion. So we really, we've been trying to minimize that as much as we can. I think based on how we do work, the people do need to know that we're AI based simply to be able to explain the fact, how our billing model works, for example, and how we're able to do attribution for how much the system has made them. But outside of that, we really try and simplify as much as possible because our target customer isn't the CTO, it's the CRO, or the CFO. Those are always who we really are trying to get in front of.
You mentioned finance. You're interested in finance earlier in your life. This reminds me of, there was a time where, Wall Street someone would take a great model that they've developed, they're a statistician or someone who's doing analytics and create a model for portfolio management or whatever it might be, some aspect of the market, and then kind of build a company or an offering around that. In a similar way, this is an evolution of that, right? Creating an AI-based model that leverages that and applying it with data. And it doesn't, fortunately, the data feeds itself into your model. You don't have to constantly come up with a model and make sure that it's correct. It'll tell you because you'll see it in action.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, it does actually, I would say, doing stuff back with in that kind of financial realm, it's gotten a lot more saturated there. It's, and again, it is, don't get me wrong, we do build, trading models, and we are familiar with, there is a lot of fun with just pumping huge amounts of data into a model and then kind of letting it go. But in our case, for this, it's just so much more scalable and there's so much more room, for this to grow that we feel that this is much more fun. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you have very measurable outcome, right? You're trying to increase the ROI and
exactly.
If you're succeeding or not.
Yeah, and that was honestly really that was one of the things that honestly I think the benefit of I'm a solo founder, so I have to kind of fill the shoes of the technical and then the the more marketing side of that. But what I found was that from a technical standpoint, it is possible for us to be able to do statistical attribution. So say, how much we've made for you with some error bars, because every time we allocate a discount to someone and they buy, it would be disingenuous for us to say, oh, we've made you the whole amount of that sale, because that sale might have occurred anyway. What we actually have to do is we have to do, we have to run small comparison groups that have the service turned on versus the service turned on, and then make estimates based on those changes between those groups to be able to say with some certainty how much money we've made people. So we really, but in doing that, we've been able to set up a model where we charge people based on their returns, which I think is a really nice model and really it should be it should be the ideal. You only pay if you've made money. And in our case, if you check, for example, our terms and conditions, you will find our billing model is in there. So it's a lot of legal, and then all of a sudden several pages of very complicated code. But the end result is that we do have very good estimates from that side of what we are actually able to do for our customers.
Great. Well, just a little bit about folks can go to your site. How do you engage with people? Someone says, I'm interested in this, and is it sitting down and plugging it into WooCommerce or whatever you're using, or is there something they can, a sandbox on your site or some way that they can kind of get a feel for how this works?
Oh, absolutely. So basically, you go to eComPricer, so we're at ecompricer.com. You just, you hit sign up. Takes, you put an email address and a password. And then the full setup involves you putting 2 JavaScript snippets into your website, one in the header, which will change the prices and collect data, and then the other in your checkout, which will go and look at, based on which customers came in and purchased, how much did they actually spend? Mm-hmm. That whole process for a Shopify takes about 120 seconds. So it's very fast. And then once those snippets are in there, you essentially are greeted with a bunch of dashboards that'll give you all this data coming in. So our customers always get all the data we collect. You have the option to download that. And then you go into set up billing and give us different versions of your product discounts. So we used to run a model where the system could choose whatever discount it wanted, which worked great. But we found that it would probably be nicer to give our customers some sense of control. So essentially, you give a set of examples of what prices and discounts you would like to be available for particular products, and then the system swaps it out. So full setup is honestly doable in about 3 minutes, if you're speedy, and then you can kind of just, stand away and let it run. It's going to just do its thing for the, however long you want it to. It'll send, it'll invoice you eventually when you start making money, and then, it'll send you reports on how much you've made. So we try and really keep it very hands-free. We don't want to create a product like Google Ads, where people are sitting down and specializing in it, because at the end of the day, that's not helpful for anyone. We've really tried to make this product as user-friendly as possible. So
I think the world needs another Google Ads. We're good without it.
No, exactly.
Great. So ecompricer.com, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So we finally, we're battling with compricer.se, which is a large Swedish company for ecompricer showing up first in the Google results. But if you Google us, we'll come up first now. Yeah. Okay. Ecompricer.com. And then, it's easy setup. You can also contact us and we'll walk you through if you have any special, cases. We do occasionally get people trying to set up with very high ticket items. So people who sell cars and realtors and stuff like that. But we do actually have solutions for them as well. And of course, no upfront charges or anything. That's, we only like to charge once we've definitely done something for you.
Well, that proves the value or not, right? That's awesome.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. Great to have you joining us. Chris Darby, who's founder with ecompricer. And I hope you'll come back. Keep us informed and updated as things progress.
Awesome. Will do. Thanks so much, Mitch. It's great to be here. Yeah.
You bet. Thanks, Chris.
Cool. All right. Have a good one.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Rob Henshaw as the Chief Marketing Officer for Cameo. We're talking about desktops and delivering them as a service in a new and different way that's going to cost a lot less. So hopefully maybe in this age where we're all working remotely, this will become a more widely used practice. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mike. Good to be here.
So walk me through what it is you guys are doing exactly, because you've been doing Windows Server for a long time in terms of creating these virtual desktops, but what's the next step and what do people have to look forward to in the coming year?
Yeah, absolutely. So here at Cameo, we're a virtual application delivery platform. So we focus on, it's really the next evolution of virtual desktops. So there was virtual desktop infrastructure, which was really costly and complex, a lot of pre-cloud technologies. Then the cloud came along and they moved VDI into the cloud, which became desktop as a service, slightly less complex, still very costly, still a lot to manage. Virtual app delivery kind of is the next evolution of that, which says, hey, for a fully hosted virtual app delivery environment, all you have to do is publish your apps. You don't have to worry about the backend infrastructure. All that's managed for you. So that's what we've been doing for a long time. And traditionally, what we've done is we've enabled you to deliver all of your apps, so your Windows apps, your SaaS apps, and your internal web apps to any device, regardless of OS. We are the only Windows OS independent virtual desktop. Every other virtual desktop on the market presents the Windows OS to the device, and you access your Windows apps via the Windows OS via virtual desktop. With Cameo, you don't have to present the Windows OS at all. You just deliver the applications. So we've always supported Windows apps, SaaS apps, and internal web apps. And now, just right before the holidays, we announced Cameo for Linux. So we now support Linux apps and the delivery of internal web apps via Linux servers, which helps dramatically reduce the cost of delivering those apps.
Aren't you seeing a lot more demand for Linux apps these days? I mean, it used to be kind of Windows apps were the default in the enterprise, but things are changing, it looks like.
There are, yeah. So Linux apps still, demand is increasing for Linux apps, but there's also an increasing demand for reducing the cost of delivering any non-Windows app. So even if it's not a Linux application that you're looking to deliver, Cameo for Linux enables you to deliver internal web apps like homegrown ERP or CRM systems that are not Windows based, but you can't. But traditionally, you had to deliver those via Windows Server. Now you can go ahead and deliver those internal web apps via Cameo for Linux on a Linux server, which typically cuts the cost of delivering that app by about 44%. And there's a couple things that this helps accomplish. One, it helps get rid of the need for Microsoft servers and RDS Cal licensing fees. So that's a huge amount of cost right there. That's $7 per user per year for the RDS Cal. And it also helps provide flexibility. So for organizations who if you're all in on Microsoft, if you are good with being, of adopting the entire Microsoft stack, that's great. If you have other, if you want to get out of Azure, if you want to go to a different cloud, if you want to go to Google Cloud or Oracle or whatever you want to do, this gives you the flexibility to deliver your apps from wherever you want to deliver them to whatever OS you want to deliver them to without having to be completely beholden to the Microsoft tech stack.
I guess going back in time, virtual desktops and VDI for that matter kind of got a bad rap, and maybe deservedly so. How has that changed, and are people more accepting of this different approach to solving the same type of problem? We're just using the cloud and kind of making it simpler, it sounds like. So do people get that, or is it still an education effort?
Yeah, so I think VDI and DAS have traditionally gotten a bad rap, and I do think that it's somewhat deserved. Traditionally, virtual desktops were something that you delivered as, the only way to give people access to the stuff that they needed access to do their jobs if they weren't in the office. But the trade-off was, laggy performance. It was frustrating for the end users. It was incredibly complex for IT to manage. So there's a lot of reasons why that bad rap exists. Virtual application delivery takes the desktop, the traditional, hey, we push the Windows OS out to the user, takes that away and says, hey, let's just push the application. So any application, whether it's Windows, Linux, SaaS, internal web app, all of those can be pushed as PWAs to the end user's device, and they can access the app just as if it was installed natively, even though it's not installed on their device. The end user experience doesn't change. There's nothing new for the user to learn. They simply click on the app like they always have. It opens up in its own window like it always has. There's just no discernible difference. Whereas with VDI and DAS, you have to go over here, you have to log into your virtual desktop, you have to wait for things to spin up, then you access your applications, you wait for that to spin up, you deal with a lot of lag. There's reasons why that experience hasn't traditionally been well received. Virtual app delivery takes all the backend piece and even the OS and strips that away and just says, here are the apps that you need to be productive. Go ahead, use them. And from the IT perspective, they don't have to deal with managing all the infrastructure. So the end user gets a better experience, IT gets a better experience, everybody wins.
So we're not as locked into the platform as we were once upon a time. We're now living in this I guess we'll call it the maybe quasi post-COVID era. What was the impact of all that rush to do remote computing on awareness of this type of solution? Did you see an uptick or more people looking at that? Or because from my perspective, everybody kind of sent everybody home and said, here's a VPN, and that was about as far as it got. So are we moving further past that at this point with something that's a little more sophisticated?
Yes, definitely. So in the early days of COVID, we saw a lot of exactly what you said, people sending people home with whatever devices they had on hand, or just telling people to use the devices that they had at their homes and gave them a VPN. We all know that VPNs are problematic, not just from a user experience perspective, but they're a huge security risk. Once you give somebody VPN access, that you're basically just giving them clear access to your network. And there's a lot of things that if they're on a device that is infected at home and that has access to your network, there's all kinds of problems that arise from VPNs. So in the early days, we saw that VPN risk skyrocket, and people quickly realized that VPNs were not at all the best way to give people access to the user experience perspective and from a corporate security perspective. So people very quickly in the early days of the pandemic, very quickly shifted to virtual desktops. And that kind of, there was a kind of a free for all between VDI, DAS, virtual app delivery, all of us kind of, going after organizations saying, hey, there's a better, more secure way to do that. But I think a lot of people, especially in those early days, just tried to put something in place because they thought it wasn't going to last that long. And so there was a feeling of, oh, this is a Band-Aid, this is a temporary fix. And so a lot of people just went with what they knew, which was traditional virtual desktops, and said, hey, we know it's painful, we know it's not the best experience for either for IT or for the end users, but we're just going to roll out a traditional VDI solution. In a lot of cases, those people found that just deploying that can take 3 to 6 months. And so that, kind of put a lot of people off. DAS, slightly faster implementation, but still pretty difficult. So on the Cameo side with virtual app delivery, we saw a huge uptick because it was a very simple way you can get up and running in a matter of days. Even for Fortune 500 companies, like we have people like Sanmina who have tens of thousands of users, you can get up and running within days, give people access to the things that they need to be productive, have that be incredibly secure. We have a no VPN technology. We have a zero trust model at the core of our platform, which means that every device, no matter what device your people happen to be working on, whatever they have in their hands at that moment, they can access the applications they need without accessing your corporate network, without accessing your corporate data. The device is separate from your network. The app is separate from their device. There's no way for people to have lateral movement. All that is controlled by Cameo. So we have seen a large uptake in people who have, even though they may have made different choices at the very beginning of the pandemic, have shifted or are in the process of shifting to a more permanent solution now that they realize that a majority of their people are going to either be remote or hybrid for the long term.
And of course, it's a new year, and that's the time for have these conversations. Are you starting to see different folks get involved with these decisions, and has that moved up the command chain, as it were? Because it used to be something that was kind of left to the IT team, but are more C-level execs getting involved in this conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, regardless of the economic situation, organizations have always kind of had two imperatives. They want to make sure that their people can be as productive as possible, but they also need to reduce cost. And then now in the current economic situation, that reduced cost piece has become even more urgent. And oftentimes that user experience and the cost reduction can kind of clash. So we are seeing, a lot of IT teams who have been, leading the charge for years now, raising their hands and saying, hey, there's a better way to do this. We are seeing that gain more traction at the C-level, at the executive level, of them realizing, okay, we need to figure out a way to enable people to work productively, work securely from wherever, regardless of how we change our working model. Today we're hybrid, tomorrow we may be all remote again, tomorrow we may be all back in the office. Regardless of what happens, regardless of what changes your organization has, you need to have a system in place that's going to allow people to continue to be uninterrupted and productive, regardless of what working situation they're in.
Are you starting to see security people get involved in this conversation as well? And are they starting to have some influence on the decision?
Absolutely. So security folks have always been really critical in the evaluation piece of these type of technologies, because it raises a lot of concern for some people, because traditionally VDI, which is stacks and stacks and stacks of lots of pre-cloud technology, it creates a very broad attack surface. VDI does. There's actually even some recent NSA warnings about one of the largest VDI providers. You could probably guess who that may be. So there's been lots of security concerns around traditional legacy virtual desktops. And so security has always gotten involved in those decisions early on. Nowadays, the security team is actually, and oftentimes is the one leading the charge and saying, hey, we need all of our people to continue to work remotely or hybrid, but we need to not introduce new areas of attack. We need to get rid of problematic VPNs. We need to we need to be able to lock things down. We need to have a zero trust model. How are we going to balance those zero trust capabilities with the need to give a bunch of people who are not on site within the corporate network access to the things that they need access to? So security is playing a much bigger role, and then oftentimes they are actually leading the charge in introducing technologies like virtual application delivery.
All right, and looking into the coming year, I know you guys worked on a report, but what is your crystal ball telling you about what's going to be happening with digital workspaces in general this year?
Yeah. So we, let's see, back in 2020, we started the Digital Workspace Ecosystem Alliance. There's about 14 members of the Alliance today. And we recently introduced our State of the Digital Workspace 2023 report, which is based on the survey responses of over 2,600 IT decision makers. And this is globally. And so there's a couple of really interesting findings there. So one is that, I don't think this surprises anybody, but 38% of organizations expect that remote will be a permanent option for at least some part of their workforce. 25% reported that hybrid was going to be their primary model moving forward. Overall, over 50% of organizations are committed to a permanent, either remote or hybrid or blended approach. So that's, everywhere you look, you see more and more articles about that. I don't think that's surprising to most people. A couple other interesting findings, though, especially when it comes to the virtual desktop realm, is that 38% of organizations said that their biggest concern was in terms of rolling out virtual desktops, was the impact that it would have on their end users and their ability to do their jobs in a seamless way. Another 32% cited overall complexity of managing those virtual desktops as their biggest roadblock. So you see this kind of competing thing happening where a large percentage of organizations are committing to supporting remote and hybrid for the long term, and yet they have like huge concerns about the cost and the complexity of managing all of that long term. And so, one of the things that we're seeing is that, there's clearly competing priorities, there's competing trends happening. There's got to be a way to bridge that gap between having to support the digital workspace and remote and hybrid work for a for the long term, without compromising security, without making life miserable for your IT team, and without slowing down the progress of your workers by making them endure technologies that are that kind of interrupt their workflow. So we're seeing the need for technologies like cloud desktops, like virtual application delivery that can bridge that gap, give the end user the experience that they've always had, the experience that they require, without creating additional headaches for IT, and actually increasing the security and reducing cost for IT.
All right, folks, you heard it here. We just might be having the year where we can have our desktop cake and eat it too. Hey, Rob, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Take care.
All right, folks, back to you in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Dotan Horowitz, who's Principal Developer Advocate for LogZIO, and we're talking about platform engineering in the context of DevOps. Dotan, welcome to the show.
Hey Mike, thank you for having me. Pleasure being here.
All right. So about once a year or so, a new buzzword comes along and everybody kind of nods their head, and here we are with platform engineering. But I'm scratching my head a little bit, frankly, because it seems like it's just a term that we're applying to a group of people that seem to be implementing DevOps, and the fact that they're all in one group somewhere, we decided to use a shorthand for the team and call them a bunch of platform engineers. But it doesn't seem to me that that's entirely different discipline, or am I missing something?
I treat it as a sort of an evolution in the maturity of DevOps. So it's not entirely different, that's for sure. I think it's taking it to the next level in terms of making it into a platform, as the name suggests, or a reusable elements for self-service across the organization. Obviously, it's much more relevant for large organizations that have lots of product lines, lots of development groups, where this reusability and consolidation makes a significant impact.
So it's almost about the level of maturity of the DevOps workflow, because I now have a team that is creating a set of processes that are reusable across multiple development teams, whereas if I went into a lot of organizations in the last few years, I might see, 8, 9, 10 different DevOps platforms and workflows all across these different business units. So is this an effort to kind of centralize DevOps workflows a little bit, and therefore we're going to have a team to manage that?
I think it boils down to pretty much what you said, because essentially the evolution is that, as you said, the DevOps grows bottoms up from individual product teams that need their own DevOps processes, tools, methodologies, and each one solves the problems. But then as the organization grows, you suddenly realize that different teams actually solved the same problem just over and over again without being aware of the fact that the neighboring team dealt with the same problem. So you need certificate rotation, you need some sort of ability to instrument and add distributed tracing or anything else, just instead of this toil happening again and again and again. You can solve it once across the organization, and obviously in a more aligned way that will be aligned with the organization's standards, processes, maybe compliance requirements, and others that not always are very clear to all the individual teams when it's disparate.
A lot of this issue seems to also come back to moments in time where 5 or 6 years ago, somebody may have built a DevOps platform and workflow, but it was a lot of, shall we say, do-it-yourself work, and they kind of stitched a lot of things together, and supporting that over time becomes more problematic. So as part of this whole effort, are we
starting to replace things that people may have built by hand with things that are more of a product that they buy and maintain, or even a service that somebody else provides, versus them trying to do every little thing from the ground up by themselves?
So I would say one very important distinction is that it's not a product that you buy off the shelf. It's not a third party, like you'd choose your own monitoring tool off the shelf, or some automation tool or some others. Platform engineers or platforms in the context of platform engineering are things that are developed inside the organization. In a way, just to showcase why I put such emphasis on that, and you probably remember that as well as I do, being the veterans in the industry, we remember less than a decade ago the buzz around PaaS, platform as a service, when we used to neatly organize things as IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. And back then, the idea was that we would be able to take off the shelf platform as a service that would then consolidate all of the underlying infrastructure for us, provide services and APIs, and then we'll be able to develop the SaaS, the software as a service, on top of that. Obviously, it didn't work out. It hasn't worked out, and we see what happened to Heroku and the web, the cloud vendors equivalents for that, Stockbeans and others, but Beanstalk, sorry, and others. But the thing is that the reason it didn't work is that a third party would never have the best fit for your organization. A vendor would never be able to tune that. And this is where I think the real power of platform engineering comes into play, because these are organic development DevOps teams sitting within your organizations, familiar with the constraints of the organization, the culture, the tool set of choice, and so on and so forth, and then can be very flexible in adapting, because not all teams would work with the same tool set, with the same methodologies, with the same workflows. And we can enforce that. The engineers are an opinionated species. I know, being an engineering background, and it needs this flexibility. And this is the power of platform engineering it brings to the organization.
When do I ultimately decide to build it myself? Is that what I'm always going to do in a platform engineering context, or would I bring in a third-party open source tool or some sort of tool that already exists that does, I don't know, 90% of what I need, and then customize it? How do I strike a balance between what I'm going to allocate my limited resources to versus wheels that are already invented?
So that's a very good point. And it's important to say it doesn't mean that the platform engineering teams don't choose anything off the shelf and do it only homegrown. So that's not it. And usually, actually, they have the platform engineers offer a sort of a golden path of tool sets for, let's say, monitoring, for observability, for management, for security and DevSecOps related chores and tasks. So it's not that they don't use these third-party tools. The question is how you wrap it up and then externalize it as reusable services internally within the organization. So you have a team that, again, as I said, let's say needs to have some sort of instrumentation, add distributed tracing to its microservices. And then you have another team faced with the same thing. Are they going to do the same? And when someone had the centralized view across the organization and sees this task being implemented again and again, and can raise that flag and say, no, I will take it upon myself and I will expose a reusable service for you with the constraints and the ways that they work, each one of these teams and the required adaptations, this is where the platform engineering and the underlying infrastructure could be utilizing off-the-shelf services or SDKs or similar.
Mm-hmm. Will there be specialists within the platform engineering team? Will we continue to see that evolve? I mean, it's kind of shorthand, but it doesn't seem to me that every platform engineer has the same skills or the same job functions. So is there a hierarchy of platform engineers, or how do we need to think about that?
So one thing that is important to understand is platform engineers are engineers and oftentimes also developers. So maybe unlike some organizations where the DevOps lean more towards the ops side of skill set, here the development side of things is important. It is, after all, a product, and this is something that I emphasize often. Treating platform engineering as the platform as a product, an internal product, but product facing. So you need someone to function as a product owner. It could be one of the engineers, but ideally, I being a past product in also other life, I think that product mindset is very important. You need to treat the users as customers to understand the use cases, the pains, the needs that arise from the different teams, the conventions within the organization, and only then derive the necessary functionality and the relevant APIs. So I would say this is the product function. Then you need developers. It could be front-end related. If it's API-based, it could be even, back-end. It could be front-end even if you offer a UI. I don't know if you've heard about Backstage by Spotify, that has fairly recently been accepted to the CNCF incubation, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation's incubation program. This is a magnificent example. This is an internal tool that Spotify developed internally to make the developer experience better, but by consolidating all of the different components available and the services and the capabilities around cloud and so on into one screen, to put it plainly. And now they've seen such a great value that they contributed to the open source, and now they're actually trying to monetize on that by even offering some paid plugins on top of that. So this is a very interesting, the power of platform in a nutshell, and I think it's an excellent example of that.
How do I strike a balance between what you might have described as maybe a benevolent dictatorship and all these developers out there that always want to kind of rip and add new tools into their pipelines as they see fit, and they're very independent-minded people?
So this is exactly where I think platform as a service failed a decade ago, and where platform engineering shows a more adequate direction. This flexibility is very difficult to achieve with a third party off the shelf, but when you have the engineering team internally within your organization, and then they approach each and every one of these teams, understand their needs, and then elicit these requirements and turn them into reusable components, then you can do the adaptation. So if a certain team likes a different flavor of monitoring, or a different convention of dashboarding, or different automation, these like JSON and these like YAML and things like that, you can create the adaptive layer on top of underlying reusable services. So you can externalize maybe a different UI, convert a JSON to YAML or the other way, things like that. So you give the developer experience is the developer productivity, I'd say, and developer experience are the value proposition of the platform engineering. And you need that. You need the flexibility to actually provide this value proposition to different teams in different ways.
Is this all provided under the IT organization, or does it kind of sit apart from the IT organization because developers and the centralized IT folks have not always had the best relationship, and it's very hard now for those two teams to have this conversation? So are we creating, essentially a bridge using this platform engineering concept?
It's also a very interesting question, because it's an emerging paradigm, and you see different evolutions and different incarnations in different organizations. And by the way, even the name itself, in some organizations, it's indeed called platform engineering team. In others, it would be called, I saw shared services, I saw cloud platform, and other variants. But so where does it belong within the organization is also dependent. I would say that it should be organically part of the engineering organization department, because the DNA and the nature is engineering. That's one pro for this approach. And the other is to tighten the relationship between the platform engineering and the let's say, product engineers, who are their users. So they need to treat platform as the product, and these are their customers or users. So they need to be very, very close to them to understand the needs, the pains, and to be able to close the feedback loop very closely. This is the advantage of having in-house teams. So if you create this silo, it will be closer to a third-party vendor with all the problematic side of that. So we should avoid that as much as possible. This would be at least the advice I would give organizations.
All right. So do we need to write up a new social contract between developers and centralized platform engineering teams about what's expected from both parties? And, what rights am I giving up as a developer in return for some central sense of less chaotic IT environments?
I think as developers, we always have this tension between two contradicting needs or wishes that we have. We have the need that you brought up for flexibility. I want the control. I want to be able to configure every bit and byte and every switch in the command line and things like that. And on the other hand, we're lazy beasts, if I may say so, being an engineer myself, and we like simplicity and we like someone to take care of things for us. So the challenge with platforms has always been, throughout the years and decades that I've been in the industry, a balance between these two edges, the flexibility and the simplicity, and where you strike this balance. As I mentioned, PaaS, for example, took a direction that is more towards simplicity, maybe too much. Platform engineering tries to bring it back more to flexibility. And the contract, the social contract that you mentioned, is exactly about that. We as a platform team provide you with simplicity. This comes with certain conventions, certain, let's say, golden paths that you can adopt. In many cases, they don't actually enforce or it's not mandatory. But then you'd say, if you choose a different stack, we'll be able to provide a higher level support and not in the finest granularity that we provide for the golden path type of tools, tool chain and tool set, where we manage the contractor, where we iterate maybe with the contractor, if we're talking about third parties underneath the hood, for bug fixes and for enhancements and things like that. We'll provide as much as we can, but this is the sort of even there, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be an off-the-shelf golden path stack and some higher level support for other alternative stacks.
Well, as they always say, folks, platform engineers, maybe they should have to run for re-election every 3 or 4 years, but just remember, democracy is messy. Hey, Dotan, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry professionals to give you the latest in the tech world. And alongside our episodes of Techstrong Women and View with Vizard, we had plenty of great content today. We will be taking a little break from broadcasting, but don't you worry, because we'll be back to our normal broadcast schedule on January 23rd. With all that being said, though, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.